Ever since my husband's company found its footing, he morphed into a stranger. His affair with another woman became brazen, as if he didn't care about hiding it anymore. When I confronted him, he dismissed my concerns with a mocking laugh. "You're worthless, living off my earnings. Be thankful I even bother with you," he spat, his contempt oozing with every word. "Get a job if you're so unhappy." Defiant, I accepted his challenge. Landing a position at his family's company, I plotted my retaliation against Michael. I'm Karen, once content as a 34-year-old homemaker, while Michael, my 36-year-old husband, managed a printing business. Our romance sparked in the corridors of our workplace. He was in sales and I in illustrations. Our love story culminated in marriage when I was 26. Once we settled into our routine, he made the bold move of resigning from his job, proposing the idea of launching a new venture together. Uncertain, I sought counsel from our trusted business partner, Bob, with whom we shared past collaborations. Bob, a seasoned CEO known for his diverse business ventures and adeptness in advertising, readily lent his support. Bob backed our endeavor and even contributed funds. I recounted, "Karen's illustrations have always impressed me," Bob remarked, his praise leaving me humbled. With gratitude, we vowed to steer our company to triumph. Just the two of us, I affirmed to Bob as we embarked on our entrepreneurial journey. Initially, we grappled with the constraints of a cramped apartment. However, with the ascent of our company, we upgraded to a sleek high-rise condominium. It was then that my husband broached the idea of me focusing solely on homemaking. "I'll hire someone else for the illustrations. Eventually, I need your full support," he asserted, his words leaving me torn. Reluctantly, I confided in Bob, our steadfast investor. "I regret to inform you, but I must step away from illustration work," I disclosed to Bob. His empathy was palpable. "It pains me to think I won't have the pleasure of witnessing Karen's illustrations anymore. Yet if you ever decide to return to it, just say the word. I'll stand by you," Bob reassured me. "Thank you, truly," I expressed my gratitude. And thus, I embraced the role of homemaker to bolster my husband's aspirations. However, my passion for drawing persisted, finding solace in sharing my illustrations on Instagram. The unexpected warmth of response has become my clandestine delight. As my husband's business flourished, our lifestyle mirrored its success. His investments yielded opulent returns, evident in the acquisition of a new car and bespoke suits from prestigious labels. While I deemed these indulgences excessive, I recognized their significance in his role as the company's figurehead. Despite his demanding schedule, he remained steadfast in our tradition of sharing dinner at home. It was a solemn pact, a sanctuary carved out for just the two of us amidst the chaos. Over these meals, he divulged the company's forthcoming ventures, a privilege that filled me with contentment. Supporting his ambitions became my source of joy. I once believed our harmonious routine would endure indefinitely. Despite the company's continued prosperity, subtle shifts began to emerge in my husband's demeanor. Gone were the animated discussions about business during our dinners. "How's everything at the company?" I inquired, met with lukewarm responses. "Everything's fine," he'd mutter, his enthusiasm conspicuously absent. Persistently, I probed for more details, only to be met with terse rebuttals. "Don't pry, you wouldn't understand. You're always here. I shouldn't have to explain every little detail." His words pierced through me, a stark departure from the understanding and camaraderie we once shared. I attempted to rationalize his behavior as fatigue or stress, but that night, as he silently retreated to our room after dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease settling in. This pattern persisted, with my husband increasingly opting for dinners away from home. Feeble justifications of social obligations or client meetings replaced our once sacred mealtime together. Despite my waiting patiently, delaying my own dinner, his absence grew routine, his excuses dwindling to nothingness. Confrontation only invited his wrath, a stark departure from the partner I once knew. I felt reduced to a mere servant in my own home, the weight of his indifference crushing me to tears. We once weathered the storms of entrepreneurship together, hand in hand. Now, I found myself relegated beneath even his employees, my sacrifices met with scorn rather than appreciation. My domestic duties weren't born out of a passion for homemaking. They were a testament to my unwavering commitment to his aspirations. Yet any semblance of gratitude had long since vanished from his eyes. In his absence, I find solace in my illustrations, a sanctuary where stress dissipates and creativity flourishes. With each stroke, my online following burgeons, their supportive comments a balm to my weary soul. Among them, a familiar name emerges, Bob's. Bob extends an offer to collaborate again. A glimmer of hope, I muse, buoyed by the prospect. Without this beacon, I might have succumbed to despair. As our shared dinners faded into memory, a palpable chasm widened between my husband and me. Suspicion crept in, fueled by the faint scent of perfume lingering on his abandoned suit jacket, a fragrance foreign to him. When confronted, he flippantly dismissed it as a triviality, a smirk playing on his lips. His nonchalance stoked the embers of my long-suppressed sorrow, igniting them into a fiery rage. Enough with the charade, I resolved. Left alone in the confines of our home, relegated to mundane chores, the gnawing fear of societal abandonment gnawed at my sanity with each passing day. My friends could only offer envy, while my parents dismissed my concerns as trivial luxuries. Left to grapple with my turmoil, alone, I bore the weight of my suspicions in solitude. Then, one fateful evening, my husband returned home inebriated. Amidst my desperate efforts to tend to him, a damning discovery awaited, a crimson imprint adorning his shirt collar. Its presence could not be dismissed as innocent, a glaring testament to another woman's trespass. In that moment, I unearthed undeniable evidence of my husband's betrayal. With resolve coursing through my veins, I confronted him the following day, brandishing the damning garment. "Where were you last night, and what is this?" I demanded, pointing to the incriminating mark. Though caught off guard by the lipstick stain, my husband remained eerily composed in the face of my accusation. "I was out with friends at a bar. Must have happened then, right? You'd need to take off your jacket for that. Didn't you notice?" he retorted, his words laced with defiance. Unconvinced by his feeble alibi, I responded, "I don't recall." With a sudden motion, my husband rose from his seat, his hand connecting with my cheek in a searing slap. Stunned, I stumbled backward, reeling from the unexpected blow, the sting of pain radiating across my skin. "When will you understand? Who do you think is providing for us?" he spat before retreating to his sanctuary. I watched his departure, tears tracing silent paths down my cheeks. In that moment, the truth struck with brutal clarity. My husband's love had waned, leaving behind a cavernous void. I was left shattered by the cold reality of our fractured relationship. From that day forth, my husband's temper became increasingly volatile. His displeasure manifested in violent outbursts, whether it be at a meal I had prepared or any perceived infraction. The once tender moments of our marriage were now eclipsed by a shadow of fear and uncertainty. "This tastes atrocious. Do you even pay attention to what I eat? If you want to keep being my wife, you better sharpen your culinary skills," my husband berated before storming out of the room. "I'll dine out. Eating this would sabotage my productivity," he declared. I trailed after him, desperation evident in my voice. "Please wait. I want to prepare meals you enjoy. But you're never home or communicate with me. How can I cater to your tastes like that?" My husband clicked his tongue in irritation at my plea. "Should we just divorce then? I'm fine with it. I can manage without you, but can you survive without me?" he sneered, his gaze piercing through me. "You're nothing but a leech, living off my earnings," he spat, his words a venomous assault. In that moment, a realization dawned upon me. This man was beyond redemption. The compassionate husband I once knew was a relic of the past. "Then I'll find a job," I declared. "What? What's gotten into you?" My husband's voice echoed with incredulity. "I'll strive for financial independence too," I affirmed. My husband erupted into laughter, doubling over. "Who would he consider hiring someone as powerless as you?" he taunted. Suppressing my rising fury, I maintained composure. Reacting with anger would only escalate the abuse. If I couldn't win through strength, I needed to strategize differently. "Fine, do as you wish, but don't neglect your household duties. With your meager earnings, I won't tolerate a neglected home," my husband dismissed, exiting our dwelling. Swiftly taking action, I enlisted the services of a detective to uncover evidence of my husband's infidelity. The findings were damning, a trove of incriminating photographs capturing my husband's dalliances with extravagantly dressed women, reveling in drinks and discreet hotel entrances. It was a mosaic of betrayal, with not just one, but several women ensnared in his web of deceit. Yet as I surveyed the evidence and listened to the detective's report, a peculiar calm washed over me. There was no rage, no sorrow, only a pragmatic acknowledgement of the situation. The ostentatious behavior that had once irked me now served as a conduit for undeniable proof. 1 week later, adorned in my finest attire, I ascended to a restaurant atop a luxurious hotel. Despite my efforts, I felt out of place amidst the opulent clientele. With a hesitant step, I approached the reserved table, where Bob awaited. My apologies for the delay, I offered, but Bob's warm smile assuaged my apprehension as he motioned for me to take a seat. Karen, no need for apologies. I've been eagerly anticipating our meeting. Your presence is worth the wait, Bob reassured, casting aside any notion of inconvenience. Bob had played a pivotal role in our journey to independence, generously backing us financially when my husband and I decided to venture out on our own. Now, he held a prominent position as the president of my husband's parent company. I'm immensely grateful for your unwavering support during our leap to independence. Your confidence in us meant the world. I expressed my gratitude. Bob chuckled warmly. It was a no-brainer for me. After all, our history together made it an easy decision, he replied. It's evident the company is thriving under your guidance, I observed. A hint of seriousness crossed Bob's features at my remark. Yes, it's progressing well, but today our focus is on your acceptance of my invitation, correct? He redirected, his smile returning to reassure me. Yes, indeed, I affirmed, straightening in my seat and extending a warm greeting. Reflecting on our past interactions, I recalled Bob's genuine admiration for my illustrations. He had been instrumental in providing funding for our venture into independence, recognizing the value I brought to the table. Moreover, he had been the lone voice cautioning against the path of becoming a homemaker. Though we had lost touch, Bob's reemergence in my life through social media rekindled our connection, leading to regular exchanges via email and text messages. You always had a keen understanding of my illustrations, didn't you? I remarked. I've been a fan of your work for quite some time. I'm thrilled you never gave up on illustrating. Your decision to reach out to me caught me off guard, though, Bob confessed. Bob had extended offers for me to join his team as an illustrator on multiple occasions, but my domestic responsibilities had always stood in the way. However, after much contemplation, I had recently made the decision to accept his proposal. In a recent conversation with my husband, Bob had seemed hesitant yet determined. And now, as he locked eyes with me, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. Bob's words hit me like a bolt from the blue. Michael's company has garnered quite a negative reputation, he divulged. What? That's surprising. Michael always spoke so highly of his job. I never imagined this, I mused, taken aback by the revelation. I've been closely involved for a while now. But as the company expanded, the quality of their work took a nosedive. Missed deadlines, errors, and he seems oblivious to it all. Bob lamented. Is this reputation widespread? I inquired, a knot forming in my stomach. The company's rapid growth initially attracted positive attention. However, it's now under scrutiny for all the wrong reasons. There are even whispers of unsavory affiliations, Bob disclosed, his tone tinged with concern. I had no idea. I've been so out of touch with Michael's professional life, I realized, a pang of unease settling in. To lighten the mood, Bob chimed in cheerfully, you'll be creating illustrations for us from now on. No need to outsource anymore. It's a significant asset for our company. I appreciate your understanding and flexibility regarding my family commitments. I express my gratitude. No worries at all. We believe in maintaining a healthy work-life balance for our employees, Bob reassured with a smile. And so, I embarked on my journey working for Bob. With my sole focus on illustration tasks, there was no need for me to commute to the office. Bob graciously granted me the opportunity to work remotely, allowing me to seamlessly juggle my household responsibilities. The sheer joy of creating art, once confined to a hobby, now bloomed into a fulfilling profession. However, amidst the satisfaction of my work, I couldn't shake the longing to have more control over my time, to pursue my passion without constraints imposed by domestic duties and supporting my husband. With my newfound income, I believed I could sustain myself independently. However, as I diligently worked, one day, the abrupt sound of the door slamming jolted me from my concentration. Rushing to the hallway, I was met with my husband's furious gaze. You traitor, he seethed. Confusion clouded my mind as I struggled to comprehend his sudden outburst. To think my own wife would snatch away my job, he spat. In that moment, realization dawned upon me. My husband's ire stemmed from my collaboration with Bob. which had opened doors to additional contracts with companies affiliated with his own. This was my retaliation, my way of reclaiming power from the one who had belittled me. But irony must have been galling for him, to have his livelihood threatened by the very person he had scorned. You have no authority to dictate my actions. I'm simply carrying out my duties with your explicit consent, I asserted, holding my ground as my husband's anger simmered. If you feel compelled, go ahead and strike me. I won't hesitate to involve the authorities, I declared, unyielding in the face of his aggression. My company's downfall is on your hands. What exactly are you trying to achieve? He accused, his frustration palpable. This has nothing to do with me, I rebutted, resolute in my stance. Retrieving the divorce papers from the adjoining room, I handed them to my husband with a steady hand. We're no longer bound by matrimony. Let's not prolong this any further, I stated firmly, severing the ties that bound us together. You're divorcing me over my company's struggles. You're just after my money, aren't you? I retorted, stung by his accusation. I could have ended this marriage whenever I please, but I chose to wait. Now that I'm successful and earning, suddenly it's convenient for you to walk away. Wait a moment. Let's discuss the future of the company first before we rush into divorce. We founded it together, remember? You're the one who ousted me from that company, my husband interjected, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. I've severed all ties with that company, and I intend to seek proper compensation, I asserted firmly, unyielding in my resolve. Michael's frustration was evident, his agitation palpable as he gnawed on his lip in vexation. How shameless can you be? You have no right to talk about compensation when you're the one initiating the divorce. Do you even realize how many times you've hurt me and your affairs? I had undeniable proof, I retorted, brandishing the incriminating photographs. As he beheld the evidence of his infidelity, my husband's facade crumbled, and he sank to his knees, pleading with desperation. Please, I beg of you. The company's on the brink of collapse. I can't handle the added burden of compensation or a divorce. I need your support now more than ever. Everyone has abandoned me the moment they caught wind of our troubles. You're the only one left, he implored, his voice quivering with raw vulnerability. I dismissed his desperate plea as utterly futile. Gathering only my essentials and work materials, I departed from the house without a backward glance. My return home only occurred once the divorce proceedings were concluded, solely to retrieve my belongings. By then, my husband's company was hemorrhaging mistakes, and he found himself deserted by all. Reduced to pleading for funds to compensate me, he spent his days in a pitiful state. In stark contrast, I embraced solitude, forging a livelihood through my beloved craft of illustration. With each stroke of the pen, I accumulated wealth, all while upholding my integrity, a stark contrast to my ex-husband's downfall.
My life's been nothing short of a roller coaster, but whose isn't, right? Born to a dad who had to play both roles after my mom decided motherhood wasn't her gig, I grew up quick, learned tough, and got myself through college without much fuss. Dad was the real MVP, working odd jobs, making sure I had what I needed, and keeping me on the straight and narrow. After college, I packed up my life and moved to the city for a job that sounded way fancier than it was, manager at a car company. It was there, in the thick of engine oil and sales targets, that my path took a turn I never saw coming. The night I met Daniel, I was out with some work friends, blowing off steam at some dive bar that had more character than cleanliness. He walked in like he owned the place, and maybe in a way, he did, charming the socks off anyone within a 2-foot radius. Our eyes locked, and that was that. Fate, if you believe in that sort of thing. Hey, he said, sliding up next to me at the bar. His smile was easy, his confidence infectious. Hey yourself, I shot back, trying to match his vibe, but feeling my cheeks heat up. Smooth, Erica, real smooth. What's a girl like you doing in a dump like this? His tone was teasing, his grin wide. Living the dream, clearly, I replied, rolling my eyes, but unable to keep the smirk off my face. And you? Lost on your way to a GQ photo shoot? He laughed, a sound that warmed me from the inside out. Something like that. I'm Daniel, by the way. Erica. Shaking his hand felt like sealing some unspoken deal. Little did I know. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. The more we chatted, the more I realized Daniel was more than just a pretty face. He was smart, funny, and had a kind of sincerity that was hard to come by. When he asked for my number, I didn't think twice. Our whirlwind romance kicked off from there. Dates turned into weekends together, and before we knew it, 2 years had flown by. Daniel popped the question on a chilly evening in December, right in the middle of the street, with snow gently falling around us. It was so cliché, so unexpected, and so perfectly us. "Marry me, Erica. I'm a better man with you by my side," he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. I was speechless, a rare state for me. "Are you out of your mind? It's freezing, and you choose now to ask?" I teased, even as tears prickled at the corners of my eyes. "Would you have me any other way?" He grinned, dropping to one knee right there on the icy sidewalk. "In your dreams, Daniel. Of course, I'll marry you." And just like that, our new beginning started. After the whole neon snow proposal scene, life with Daniel took on a new kind of normal. We were in that love bubble where even the burnt toast felt like a sign of our quirky domestic bliss. But as with any couple, the real world wasn't about to let us float too high without a reality check. "Erica, we've been trying for a while now. Maybe we should see a doctor, just to check everything's alright," Daniel said one evening, his voice laced with a concern he tried to mask with a casual shrug. I paused, the reality of our situation sinking in. "Yeah, I guess it wouldn't hurt. I just thought it would have happened by now, My voice trailed off, a mix of disappointment and worry creeping in. The tests were a blur of clinical words and sympathetic smiles. "Everything seems in order, but these things can sometimes take time," the doctor had said, offering a reassuring pat on the shoulder that felt more patronizing than comforting. Months turned into a year, and the strain began to show. Not just on me, but on us. Daniel was trying to be supportive, but the disappointment each month was a heavy silence we both carried. One night, after yet another negative test, Daniel found me on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, not really seeing anything. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside me and taking my hand. "Talk to me, Erica." I sighed, the weight of our struggles pressing down on me. "What if it never happens, Daniel? What if we can't have a baby?" Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes meeting mine with a fierceness I hadn't expected. "Then we'll figure it out. Together. We always do." But I refused to believe that. "We're going to have a family, Erica, no matter what it takes." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. "I love you, Daniel. I just hate seeing you disappointed." "Disappointed? Erica, the only disappointment is seeing you this upset. We're in this together, remember? Screw everything else." And then, when we least expected it, the impossible happened. I was late, but not in the way I'd grown accustomed to each month, with a sinking heart. This time, hope flickered to life, cautious and fragile. "Daniel," I called out, holding the pregnancy test in shaky hands. "Can you come here?" He appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "What's up?" I held out the test to him, the positive sign glaring back at us in bold defiance of all the months of heartache. "We're going to have a baby," I whispered, disbelief and joy mingling in my voice. Daniel's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He scooped me up in his arms, spinning me around as he laughed, a sound so pure and full of happiness it brought tears to my eyes. "I told you, Erica. I told you we'd make it happen." His voice was triumphant, his hold on me tight and reassuring. That night, we celebrated, just the two of us, talking about the future, our dreams for our child, and how we couldn't wait to meet the little person who had already changed our lives. Quitting my job wasn't an easy decision, but Daniel was pretty adamant about it. "Babe, we need you focusing on the little one. We'll manage. I'll take care of everything else," he'd said, his tone leaving little room for argument. I knew he meant well, wanting to provide for us and ease my burden, but the reality of my days, filled with sickness and exhaustion, was far from what I'd imagined. Mornings were the worst. I'd wake up, run to the bathroom, and barely make it back to bed before the exhaustion hit me like a truck. It wasn't just the nausea, my whole body felt like it was rebelling against me, swelling up and aching in places I didn't even know could ache. "Daniel, can you grab me some crackers?" I'd call out weakly, hoping to stave off another wave of nausea. But more often than not, Daniel was already out the door, his second job eating up all his time. The few times he was home, I could barely keep my eyes open, let alone maintain a conversation. "You're always sleeping," he'd snap, his patience wearing thin. "Don't you care about anything else anymore?" His words stung, adding guilt to the cocktail of discomfort I was already dealing with. "I'm trying," I'd whisper back, tears welling up in my eyes. "You think I enjoy this?" Our arguments became more frequent, each one leaving a bitter taste and widening the gap between us. The joy of expecting our first child was overshadowed by the strain it put on our relationship. Daniel's late nights and my physical woes had us living like strangers under the same roof. One night, as I lay on the couch, too tired and sore to move to the bed, Daniel came home later than usual. The sound of the door slamming jolted me awake, my heart racing. "Another long night?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "What do you think?" he retorted, his voice sharp with exhaustion. "Someone's gotta pay for all this," he added, gesturing vaguely around our small apartment. I bit my lip, holding back the tears. I miss you, Daniel. We hardly talk anymore." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was stressed. "Erica, I'm doing the best I can here. I don't know what you want from me." "I want us back," I said softly, the loneliness in my voice echoing in the silence that followed. With Daniel working all hours and me trying to prep for our baby girl's arrival, things were tense. His folks, though, were a godsend. Living just a short drive away, they'd pop over often, helping out however they could. His mom, Linda, was particularly amazing, taking the lead on throwing a baby shower that was nothing short of spectacular. Linda turned our little apartment into a pink wonderland, filled with flowers, treats, and laughter. She even crafted this elaborate diaper cake that was both bizarre and beautiful. The wall behind the dining table was adorned with Sophia, our chosen name, in big, glittery letters. It was perfect, except for one glaring absence, Daniel. I'd asked him, no, pleaded with him to make it back in time. "It's important to me, Daniel. Please, try to leave work early for once," I had said over the phone that morning, hope threading through my voice. Yeah, I'll see what I can do," he'd muttered, the sound of his keyboard clacking in the background. I should have known then not to get my hopes up. The party was a hit, with Linda's games and jokes keeping everyone entertained. Yet, my eyes kept darting to the door, wishing for it to open and Daniel to walk through. But he didn't. Not until long after the last guest had left, long after the laughter had died down. He stormed in at 11 p.m., the joy of the day evaporating the second I saw his face, contorted in anger. "What the hell happened here?" he barked, staring at the mess of decorations and leftover food. I was on the sofa, feet swollen, emotions frayed. "It was the baby shower, Daniel. Your mom and we organized it together. And you couldn't clean up? What's with that stupid name on the wall? Is that supposed to stay there?" His words were like daggers, each one slicing through the happiness I had felt just hours before. Tears spilled over, my voice a whisper among sobs. "It's our daughter's name, Daniel. Your mother put it up. I thought you'd be here." He scoffed, his anger unyielding. "I was working, Erica. Something you'd know nothing about anymore." With that, he stormed off to the bedroom, leaving me alone, drowning in a sea of pink and tears. The next morning was as if the night before had never happened. Daniel left for work without a word, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat there, in the aftermath of what was supposed to be a celebration, feeling more alone than ever. Linda came by later, her face falling as she took in the scene and my red-rimmed eyes. He didn't make it, did he? It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement of a painful truth. I shook my head, unable to find the words. She sighed, her disappointment in her son palpable. I'll talk to him, Erica. This isn't right. But I knew deep down that no amount of talking would fix what was broken. Daniel had drifted so far from us, from me, that I wasn't sure he could find his way back. The day our daughter, Sophia, came into the world, it was just me and the buzz of my phone. I texted Daniel right after she was born, a simple message bursting with the biggest news. You're a dad. Sophia's here. But all I got back was silence, even though I saw he'd read the message. It was like shouting into a void, expecting an echo that never comes. Leaving the hospital, my in-laws were the ones by my side, not Daniel. They were angels, honestly, helping with everything from the car seat to setting up a little nest for Sophia back at home. You just focus on being a mom, Erica. We've got the rest. Linda, my mother-in-law, assured me with a warm smile that made things a little less heavy. When Daniel finally did show up, days later, his awkwardness around Sophia was like a wall between us. I don't think I should hold her. I might do it wrong, hurt her or something, he muttered, staring at his own daughter like she was a stranger. I tried to keep the peace, keep things light. It's not rocket science, Daniel. You won't break her. Here, just support her head, I said, gently offering our daughter to him. But he just backed away, shaking his head. Nah, better not. I'm all thumbs, remember? His attempt at a joke fell flat, leaving a sour taste. It was clear it wasn't just clumsiness holding him back, he didn't want to hold her, be near her. Things didn't get better. Nights were the hardest. Sophia, like any newborn, kept us up at all hours. But instead of pulling together, Daniel pulled away. One night, after a particularly rough round of crying, he announced, I can't do this. I need sleep for work. I'll be in the spare room. Just like that, then? You're bailing on us? I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice, holding Sophia close, feeling more alone than ever. It's not like that, Erica. I need to function, alright? And with that, he left our room, the gap between us growing wider with every step he took away. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's visits to our bedroom became less and less frequent, until they stopped altogether. Our conversations were brief, functional, avoiding the elephant in the room, his absence, his detachment, and the growing distance between us not just as parents, but as a couple. One evening, I tried again, hoping to bridge the gap for Sophia's sake. She's changing every day, Daniel. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I asked, hoping for something, anything, that showed he cared. He looked tired, worn down, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes when he glanced at Sophia. Of course, it does, Erica. I'm just not cut out for the baby stage, I guess. It's not a stage, Daniel. It's our life now, I replied, feeling the weight of our new reality pressing down on us both. Life with a newborn was no joke. Sophia was an angel by day, but turned into a party animal by night, crying and fussing till the sun came up. I was running on empty, looking more like a walking ghost than a new mom. Self-care was a distant memory, and all I dreamt about was sleep. One evening, as the clock ticked past our usual dinner time, I realized I hadn't even thought about cooking. Daniel came home, tired and hungry, to find the kitchen empty and me, half asleep with Sophia in my arms. What's this? Where's dinner? He barked, his voice echoing off the walls, filled with frustration. I blinked back, tears, exhaustion making it hard to form a coherent response. I didn't get to it. Sophia was up all night, and what? You're home all day, Erica. How hard can it be to throw something together? His outburst cut deep, each word a reminder of how far we'd drifted from each other. This became our new normal, Daniel complaining about the lack of cooked meals, the untidy house, and how I was always too tired. His words stung, leaving me feeling inadequate and alone. One day, after a particularly harsh criticism, I reached out to Linda, spilling everything that had been happening. Daniel just doesn't understand. I'm trying, but it's never enough. I confessed over the phone, the dam of my emotions breaking. Oh, honey. Linda's voice was a mix of anger and sympathy. He has no right to speak to you like that. You're doing your best. I'll have a word with him. And don't you worry, I'll help you out with the dinners. True to her word, Linda started dropping off meals for us, making sure Daniel didn't catch on. It was our little secret, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you, Linda. I don't know what I'd do without you, I said one evening as she handed me a casserole, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't in this alone. Don't mention it, dear. Your family. And it's high time Daniel remembered that too, Linda replied, her tone firm, promising change. Her help was a band-aid on a bullet wound, though. Daniel's temper flared over trivial things, his patience thinning more each day. The meals may have been sorted, but the underlying issues, the lack of understanding and support, remained. One night, as Daniel complained about the laundry not being done, I couldn't hold back any longer. I'm not Superwoman, Daniel. I'm doing the best I can. Why can't you see that? I yelled back, my voice shaky with pent-up frustration and fatigue. He stared at me, his expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. Well, maybe if you managed your time better. Managed my time better? I interrupted, incredulous. I'm trying to keep our daughter happy and healthy, on no sleep, with no help from you. What more do you want from me? Our argument spiraled from there, a harsh exchange of words and accusations. It was clear that something had to give. Linda's intervention was a temporary fix, but Daniel and I were on the brink, our marriage strained to breaking point by resentment and misunderstanding. That evening, everything came to a head in a way I never expected. Daniel stormed in, his face thunderous, while I was setting the table with the food Linda had brought over. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Without even tasting the food, Daniel swept the plates off the table, shattering them against the floor. I can't eat this crap. It's tasteless, he yelled, his anger palpable. I stood there, stunned into silence, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could muster a response, Linda emerged from Sophia's room, having heard the commotion. What on earth is going on here? Why did you dump my food on the floor? She demanded, her eyes darting between the mess on the floor and her son's furious face. Daniel, caught off guard by his mother's sudden appearance, stammered. I thought. Erica made this. It's awful. Linda's face turned red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. You thought Erica made this? And that gives you the right to act like a child, throwing food around? She stepped closer to him, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how hard she's working, caring for your daughter all day and night? When was the last time you acknowledged that, huh? Daniel looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him up. Mom, No, Daniel. Linda cut him off sharply. You need to hear this. Erica's doing the best she can under tough circumstances. And instead of supporting her, you criticize and belittle her efforts. Shame on you. Daniel's eyes lowered, the fight going out of him. He mumbled an apology to his mother, but Linda was quick to correct him. You owe your apology to Erica, not me. And you know what? You need to spend a day in her shoes. Maybe then you'll understand. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken truths and realizations. Daniel nodded slowly, the reality of his actions beginning to sink in. I'm sorry, Erica. I didn't realize. Linda's plan was simple, yet daunting. Daniel would take over all my duties for a day, caring for Sophia without any help unless it was absolutely necessary. I was skeptical, but desperate for a breakthrough. After Linda's departure, the air was still thick with tension, but there was a newfound resolve between us. "So, we're doing this, huh?" I asked, half doubting, half hopeful. "You're going to take a crack at my day today?" Daniel nodded, the weight of his recent realizations evident in his posture. "Yeah, I need to see for myself. How hard can it be, right?" There was a hint of his old, cocky humor, but it was laced with apprehension. "Okay, but you're on your own, remember? I'm just a call away, but only if you really need it," I reminded him, laying out Sophia's schedule, her feeds, her naps, everything on paper. Spending the day with Linda was a breath of fresh air, literally and figuratively. We shopped, laughed, and for a few hours, I was just me again, not just a mom or a tired wife. Coming home, I was greeted by the sight of Daniel, who looked like he'd been through a war zone. His hair was a mess, there were stains on his shirt, and the living room looked like a toy bomb had exploded. "Erica," he breathed out, relief and something else, maybe respect, coloring his tone. He wrapped me in an exhausted embrace. "I'm sorry for everything. This was the hardest day of my life." I couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the past weeks melting away. "Oh, really? And here I thought it was just me not managing my time well," I teased, but gently, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. He kissed my hands, an act so tender it made my heart swell. "Please, don't leave me alone with her for that long again. I had no idea, everything you do. It's unbelievable." After that day, things started to shift between us. It was like we finally found our rhythm again, understanding and appreciating each other in ways we'd forgotten. He got it now, how relentless and exhausting it was to care for Sophia, and he stepped up, big time. "Hey, why don't you take the afternoon off?" he'd suggest on a Saturday, seeing the fatigue in my eyes. "Go hit the shops or get your nails done. I've got Sophia." Linda and we became thick as thieves. She wasn't just my mother-in-law anymore, she was my confidant, my support system. "You've done wonders for him, you know." For both of them, she'd tell me, and I could see the pride in her eyes. One evening, as we sat down after putting Sophia to bed, Daniel turned to me, his hand finding mine across the couch. "I was thinking, maybe it's time for you to focus on what you want again. You've been talking about going back to work, right?" I nodded, surprised. "Yeah, but I didn't want to just spring it on you. We've just gotten back on track." He squeezed my hand, his smile reassuring. "We're a team, remember? I've seen how much you've sacrificed, how hard you've worked to keep our little world spinning. It's my turn to support you now." The relief and love I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I've missed my work, but I was scared it would be too much for us to handle. "We'll make it work. Just like we always do. Together," he said, the determination in his voice matching the resolve in my heart. And so, I started looking into going back to work, energized by the prospect of reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd put aside. Daniel and we found our balance, sharing the load of parenting and household duties, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. At 58, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm for me. My days were filled with the simple pleasures of home life and long, leisurely walks with my husband, Tom, who had recently retired. Our son, Danny, had grown into a man of 30, married to Clara, a woman with whom my relationship could best be described as strained. Despite the friction, I held out hope that time would mend whatever rift lay between us. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the phone rang, slicing through the quiet hum of our home. Tom was out in the yard, probably fussing over his tomato plants, and I was knee-deep in a book, enjoying the kind of peace you only get when you've retired to the outskirts of the city. Our life was simple, the way we liked it. "Hello?" I answered, expecting it to be Tom, maybe needing a hand with something outside. "Hey, Mom, it's Danny." His voice, always a bit hurried, sounded even more so today. "Danny, what's up? Is everything okay?" I sat up, my book forgotten. Calls in the middle of the day were rare. Danny's job kept him busy, and Clara, his wife, even busier with her own things. Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, I was wondering. Clara and I are getting our place renovated, and it's turning into a bigger mess than we thought. Can we crash with you and Dad for a bit? There was a hopeful lilt in his voice, but it was rushed, almost as if he was expecting a no. I paused, considering. Our small house wasn't exactly guest-ready, especially not for an indefinite stay. But this was Danny, our son, and his need echoed in me, stirring that maternal instinct that never quite fades, no matter how old they get. Well, I don't see why not. Let me just chat with your dad, but I'm sure it'll be fine. How long are we talking about here? Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. Just a couple of weeks, tops. I owe you one. The relief in his voice was palpable. All right, just remember, it's cozy here. You two will need to help out around the house, okay? Of course, Mom. Thanks again. We'll bring over our stuff this weekend. Hanging up, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. It had been a while since we'd had the house full. Danny moving out had left a quiet that Jack and I had grown accustomed to, filling it with walks, gardening, and the kind of togetherness that comes with having weathered many of life's storms side by side. Tom, I called out, stepping onto the porch. Danny and Clara are going to stay with us for a bit. Tom looked up from his tomatoes, wiping his brow. Oh? What's the occasion? Their apartment's a war zone, renovations gone wild. They need a place to crash. He chuckled, a deep, warm sound. Well, it'll be nice to have some extra hands around. When are they coming? This weekend. Better get the spare room ready then. And maybe stock up on coffee, you know how Danny is in the mornings. I laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. I'll add it to the list. The weekend came faster than expected. Danny and Clara arrived with their belongings, a whirlwind of bags and boxes that seemed to spill into every corner of our once-ordered home. Clara, always a bit on the edge, seemed even more so, her eyes darting around as if assessing whether our humble abode was up to her standards. Thanks for letting us stay. We'll try not to be in the way, Danny said, dropping a heavy suitcase with a thud. It's no trouble, dear. You know you're always welcome here, I replied, shooting a glance at Clara, who offered a tight smile in return. Life at our house had taken a turn towards the chaotic since Danny and Clara moved in. I was doing my best, keeping the place tidy and cooking meals that could feed an army, or at least that's how it felt with 2 extra mouths to feed. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to think she was on some extended vacation, contributing nothing to the household chores. Despite only working half-days, her afternoons were spent either glued to her phone or watching TV. One day, after tripping over a pair of Clara's shoes left in the middle of the living room for what felt like the 100th time, I decided enough was enough. I found her lounging on the couch, absorbed in her phone as usual. Clara, do you think you could start picking up after yourself? Maybe even help out around the house a bit? I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though inside I was boiling. She looked up at me, her expression one of disbelief, as if I'd asked her to climb Everest in flip-flops. I'm a guest here, Linda. I shouldn't have to do chores in my husband's parents' house. That's just not how it works. I stared at her, dumbfounded by her audacity. Well, in this house, we all contribute. It's not a hotel. The conversation went nowhere. Clara simply shrugged and went back to her phone, leaving me fuming. That night, I made a decision. I cooked dinner just for Tom and me, a silent protest against Clara's laziness. When Danny came home and saw only 2 places set at the table, his confusion quickly turned to indignation. What's this about, Mom? Why aren't there plates for me and Clara? I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the confrontation. Your wife seems to think she's staying at a 5-star hotel where the service is included. This is a family home, Danny. We all do our part. Danny's face turned red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. That's not fair, Mom. We're guests. I shook my head, resolute. No, son. You're family, and in this family, we help each other out. You can either pitch in or find a hotel. The words hung heavy in the air. Danny stormed off to talk to Clara, and I could hear the muffled sounds of their discussion. Eventually, they both appeared in the kitchen, Clara with a look that could curdle milk. Fine, Danny said, his voice tight. We'll help out around the house. Clara didn't say a word, just nodded stiffly, her arms crossed over her chest as if she'd been asked to donate a kidney rather than wash a few dishes. After weeks of endless cleaning, cooking, and refereeing arguments between Danny and Clara, I hit my breaking point. Tom, I said one evening, we need a break. How about we book that hotel by the ocean you've always talked about? Tom, looking as worn out as I felt, didn't hesitate. Let's do it. We deserve some peace. Breaking the news to Danny and Clara didn't go as smoothly as booking the hotel had. You're going on a vacation? Danny asked, disbelief coloring his tone. Why? You're always at home. I bristled at his response, the insinuation that my days were leisurely enough as it was. Even people who stay at home need a break, Danny. Especially with the extra workload we've had. Danny's next words floored me. Instead of wasting money on a holiday, you could help us out more. We need new furniture for the apartment. I stared at him, speechless. This was the boy I'd raised, who I'd poured my heart and soul into. I can't believe you're saying this. Your father and I are going, and that's final. Our trip was a balm for our weary souls. The ocean's roar, the sunsets, long walks on the beach, all of it reminded Tom and me of the world beyond our doorstep, beyond the daily grind. Returning home, however, was like stepping into a disaster zone. Pizza boxes towered like skyscrapers on the kitchen counter, empty bottles clinked together on the floor, and a general layer of dust and disarray covered everything. It looked like a tornado had swept through, deciding to make our living room its final resting place. Danny, Clara, I called out, my voice echoing through the chaos. They emerged, looking sheepish and a bit caught off guard by our early return. Why didn't you clean up? You knew we were coming back today, I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. Clara shrugged, her indifference like a slap in the face. No one pays me to clean up around here. Tom and I exchanged glances, both of us teetering on the edge of losing our cool. This is not a hotel, and you're not guests. You're family, and this is your home as much as it is ours, Tom said, his voice firm yet controlled. Danny seemed to shrink a bit, perhaps realizing the extent of their neglect. Sorry, Mom, Dad. We'll clean it up now. But the damage was done, the disregard for our home too stark to ignore. As they scrambled to tidy up, Tom and I retreated to our room, the joy from our trip fading fast. The realization that our return to peace was temporary weighed heavily on us. Our home, our sanctuary, had been treated like a mere crash pad, and the respect we expected from our own family felt miles away. As December rolled around, the chill wasn't just in the air, it had settled right into our home, thick and palpable. Christmas, a time I'd always cherished for its warmth and togetherness, felt under threat this year. Still, I was determined to keep traditions alive, to find some joy in the season, despite the tensions. Tom, I said, pulling out boxes of decorations from the attic. Let's make the house look festive. Maybe it'll lighten the mood around here. Tom nodded, a small smile breaking through his usual reserved demeanor. That sounds like a great idea, love. Let's deck the halls, then. The process of decorating became a bittersweet activity. Each ornament, each strand of lights, was a memory, a reminder of Christmases past when Danny was just a boy, his eyes wide with wonder at the sight of the tree all lit up. This year, however, Danny and Clara seemed more distant than ever. When I asked if they wanted to join in, Danny shrugged. We're actually planning to go to the mountains for Christmas, just Clara and me. The news hit me harder than expected. Oh, I see. Well, that sounds like a lovely trip, I managed to say, my voice steady despite the pang in my heart. Clara, who'd been silent, finally spoke up. Yeah, we thought it'd be nice to have a change of scenery. Besides, it's not like we're missing much here, right? Her words, sharp and dismissive, stung. I bit my tongue, focusing on the garland I was untangling rather than the growing gap between us. Determined to inject some warmth into our strained relations, I thought of a simple yet hopeful gesture. Tom, what if we give everyone lottery tickets for Christmas? It's fun, and who knows, it might even bring us some luck. Tom, ever supportive, just nodded. Sure, love. It's worth a try. Might lighten the mood around here. When Christmas Eve came around, I carefully wrapped the tickets in festive paper, hoping to see a spark of excitement or at least a smile from Danny and Clara. The moment of truth arrived as we sat around the living room, the air filled with the mixed scents of pine and the cinnamon from the cookies I'd baked. Here you go, everyone. A little something for fun, I said, handing out the envelopes with a hopeful smile. Danny took his with a puzzled look, but it was Clara's reaction that left me stunned. She barely glanced at the envelope before tossing it aside with a scoff. Lottery tickets? Really? That's what you think of giving us? My heart sank, but I tried to keep my tone light. It's just for a bit of fun, Clara. Everyone enjoys the thrill of possibly winning something, right? Danny, catching on to Clara's disdain, shrugged and set his envelope on the coffee table. Thanks, but it's not really our thing. I stood there, the festive cheer draining out of me, replaced by a heavy disappointment. Without another word, I picked up the discarded tickets. All right then, no harm done. Tom and I will keep them. Merry Christmas, anyway. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversations, the warmth of the season lost in the chill of their indifference. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of solidarity that spoke volumes. As they left for their trip, the house felt emptier than ever, but Tom and I decided to make the best of it. We settled in for a quiet Christmas, just the two of us, reminiscing about the past and pondering the future. It's just us this year, Tom. Feels strange, doesn't it? I mused, sipping my hot cocoa. Tom took my hand, his eyes soft. It does, love. But we've got each other, and that's more than enough. Our simple celebration was a testament to our resilience, a reminder that while we couldn't control everything, we could still find happiness in the little moments, in the shared smiles and quiet nights. After the calm and reflective holiday Tom and I shared, pondering over Danny's behavior, our lives took a turn for the surreal. Discovering that the lottery tickets, dismissed and discarded by Danny and Clara, were winners felt like a bolt from the blue. We were suddenly over $500,000 richer, a windfall that left us dizzy with possibilities. My dreams of travel and Tom's longing for a new home suddenly seemed within reach. The news, however, didn't stay just between us for long. When Danny and Clara caught wind of our good fortune, the atmosphere in the house shifted palpably. Danny, Clara, we've got some news. I began, the winning tickets in hand. Those tickets you didn't want? They won. Big time. Danny's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something else, greed, maybe? So, when do we get our part? He asked, his tone eager, almost desperate. You said those tickets were our Christmas gifts, right? I couldn't help but feel a sting at his words, a reminder of their earlier disdain. You tossed those gifts aside, remember? You made it clear they meant nothing to you. Clara, never one to hold back, jumped in with her own demands. We need that money. I've been looking at cars, and... Stop right there. I interrupted, my patience fraying. You can't reject a gift and then claim it when it suits you. And as for the money, it's ours. We're thinking of traveling, maybe even buying a new home. And it's time you two found your own place. Your apartment's renovation has been done for ages. The conversation spiraled from there, Clara's face turning a shade of red I'd only seen on tomatoes in mid-July. She stormed off, her exit marked by the slam of a bedroom door, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Danny, however, wasn't ready to drop it. But the apartment isn't ready. We can't move out yet. Tom and I exchanged weary glances. This wasn't the first time we'd heard that excuse. Listen, Danny, we've been more than accommodating, but it's been months. It's time you two figured things out on your own. The standoff lingered, an uncomfortable cloud over the house, until, finally, I caved. Fine. 1 more month. But that's it. Use it to get your apartment sorted. Danny nodded, relief visible in his posture, but the tension didn't dissipate. It hung between us, a reminder of the growing divide, of expectations unmet and generosity taken for granted. The evening was settling in, a soft golden light filtering through the curtains, when I noticed Clara's laptop left carelessly on the living room table. I moved to tidy up, my hand accidentally brushing against the mousepad. The screen flickered to life, revealing tabs that sent a shiver down my spine, legal advice on declaring someone legally incompetent, understanding first-line errors, and guides on claiming an inheritance. Tom, I called out, my voice a mix of disbelief and concern. He came over, and I pointed at the screen. Look at this. He squinted at the laptop, reading the open tabs, and his brow furrowed. What in the world? We don't know for sure what this means, I said, feeling a knot of worry in my stomach. But we can't just ignore it. Tom nodded, his usual calm demeanor taking on a hint of steel. We won't. Let's make sure we're protected. The decision to visit our lawyer wasn't taken lightly. We explained the situation without naming Clara directly, seeking advice on how to safeguard our assets and ensure our will reflected our wishes. The lawyer recommended updating our will to protect our estate, advice we took to heart. We made the difficult decision to exclude Danny from our will, a move that pained me deeply but felt necessary under the circumstances. Additionally, I took steps to secure our bank accounts, adding extra layers of security and setting conditions for withdrawals and transfers. It was a precautionary measure, one I hoped we'd never need, but the peace of mind it provided was invaluable. Once these protections were in place, I called Danny. My heart was heavy as I spoke, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Danny, your father and I have decided to go on a long cruise. We need you and Clara to find your own place within a week. His response was a mix of surprise and frustration. A week? That's not a lot of time, Mom. I know, and under different circumstances, we'd offer more time. But this decision is final. It's time for all of us to move forward, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. After the call, Tom and I shared a long, silent look. The news of the upcoming cruise was a way to push Clara to take decisive action. On a crisp Saturday morning, with a plan heavy on our hearts, Tom and I decided to leave a recording device hidden in the living room. Our home, once a place of warmth and laughter, had become a stage for a plot that chilled us to the bone. With the device set, we went for a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear the storm of emotions brewing inside us. Upon our return, the aroma of dinner welcomed us, a surprise from Clara, who had never before taken the initiative to cook for us. This unexpected act of kindness left us bewildered, teetering on the edge of hope and suspicion. Let's listen to the recording before dinner, I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom nodded, his face etched with worry. In the privacy of our bedroom, we played the recording. The voices of our son and Clara filled the room, unveiling a plan so dark it felt like a punch to the gut. Clara, with her knowledge from working in a psychiatric center, detailed how they could use certain drugs to incapacitate us, with the end goal of declaring us legally incompetent and seizing control of our assets. Hearing Danny's hesitant agreement was a betrayal that cut deeper than Clara's scheming. Our own son, complicit in a plan that would rob us of our freedom and our life's work. The recording ended, and silence engulfed us, a silence heavy with the weight of shattered trust. Tom reached for my hand, his grip firm, a silent vow that we would face this together. We can't confront them directly, I said, my mind racing. We need to be smart, to protect ourselves and expose their plot without putting ourselves in danger. Tom agreed, his jaw set. We'll play along for now, but we're taking steps to secure our safety and our assets. They won't know what hit them. The decision to act as if nothing had changed was one of the hardest I've ever made. To sit at the dinner table, sharing a meal Clara had prepared, knowing her intentions, required a strength I didn't know I had. We thanked her for the dinner, exchanging pleasantries while a storm raged within us. Our son, our flesh and blood, had been drawn into a scheme against us, and we were determined to find a way to reach him, to remind him of the values we had tried to instill in him. As we laid our plans, Tom and I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But together, we were resolved to navigate it with grace, to emerge not just unscathed but stronger. After the harrowing discovery and the tense days that followed, Tom and I decided to handle the situation with as much grace and caution as we could muster. We played along with Clara's plan, pretending that the effects of the supposed drugs had taken hold. The day she planned to administer the final dose, we had already set our plan into motion. That evening, as we sat down to what was supposed to be our last meal in our own home, the doorbell rang. Clara, confident in her victory, went to answer it, only to find the police on our doorstep. I had called them earlier, explaining our suspicions and the imminent danger we believed we were in. We believe there's been an attempt to harm us, I told the officers, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Could you please analyze this tea? Clara tried to intervene, her face a mask of panic as she reached for the kettle, but one of the officers was quicker, securing it for evidence. The investigation that followed was swift and damning. The evidence against Clara was overwhelming, leading to her conviction. While it pained me to see my family torn apart this way, the safety and well-being of Tom and I had to come first. We received a significant financial compensation, but no amount of money could repair the emotional and relational damage that had been inflicted. In the aftermath, Danny and Clara's marriage crumbled, and he moved away, starting anew in another city. Though our hearts ached for what could have been, Tom and I knew that some bridges were too charred to be crossed again. A year later, Clara reached out, claiming to be pregnant and in need of financial support. The call was a jarring reminder of the pain we had endured, but it also underscored the distance we had come. "You know that's not possible," I said firmly before ending the call and blocking her number. It was a definitive closure on a chapter of our lives we were eager to leave behind. Tom and I sold our old house, the scene of so much strife, and moved into a new home that was everything we had dreamed of. It was our sanctuary, a place where the shadows of the past could not reach us. The sale, coupled with our financial compensation, left us with more than enough to fulfill our dreams of travel and a carefree life. As we settled into our new home, we often reflected on the journey that brought us here. The trials we faced tested our resolve, our morality, and our behavior towards those we had once considered family. But in the end, we emerged stronger, with a renewed appreciation for the peace and security we had fought so hard to protect. "Here's to new beginnings," Tom said one evening, raising a glass in our new living room, the sunset painting the sky outside with hues of gold and orange. "New beginnings," I echoed, the words a promise of hope, of adventures yet to come, and of the unbreakable bond that had carried us through the storm. Our story was not one of revenge or bitterness, but of resilience, of the moral courage to stand up for ourselves, and of the profound belief that moving on was not only possible but necessary for our happiness and well-being. Growing up in a rural area meant life was pretty straightforward for me and my older brother, Jack. We were the kind of family that stuck together through thick and thin, a principle drilled into us by our parents from the get-go. Our home wasn't much to look at, a modest farmhouse with peeling paint and creaky floorboards, but it was filled with love and laughter, making it a sanctuary for both of us. Our dad was a man of few words, preferring to let his actions speak for him. He worked the fields from dawn till dusk, his hands as rough as the soil he tended to. Mom, on the other hand, was the heart of our home. Her laughter was infectious, and she had a way of making even the simplest meals taste like gourmet feasts. Jack was always the competitive one, always aiming to be first, whether it was reaching the dinner table or finishing chores. "Beat ya again, sis," he'd boast, a wide grin plastered on his face, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Only 'cause you cheat," I'd retort, my hands on my hips, trying to look annoyed but failing miserably. We'd bicker back and forth, but it was all in good fun. School was a mixed bag for us. I loved the learning, soaking up knowledge like a sponge, while Jack was more interested in anything that didn't involve sitting still for too long. It was during these formative years that I realized I wanted something different for myself. I loved our home, but I yearned to see what was beyond the fields and fences that made up our world. College was my ticket out, a chance to explore and grow. When the acceptance letter arrived, it was a moment of mixed emotions. Mom was over the moon, proud as could be, while Dad gave me one of his rare smiles, his eyes saying what his mouth couldn't. Jack, though, was harder to read. "You sure about this, Sarah?" he asked one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. His voice was gruff, the words heavy with unspoken concern. "Yeah, I am," I replied, my voice steady, but my heart racing. I need to see what's out there, you know?" Jack nodded, the silence stretching between us. "Just don't forget where you come from, alright? These fields, this house, it's part of who you are." "I won't, I promise," I assured him, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. It was a promise I intended to keep, no matter how far I roamed. College was a blur of studies and newfound freedoms, a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. Upon graduation, the thought of returning to that simple, rural life was overshadowed by the opportunities that lay in the city. I took a job and settled into my grandmother's house, a cozy little place that felt like a piece of home in the midst of urban chaos. The Harrisons, an elderly couple with hearts as wide as the fields back home, lived beside my grandmother's house, which I now called my own. Their granddaughter, Lily, lived with them, a city girl through and through, her world seemingly a universe apart from mine. Jack and Lily's whirlwind romance caught us all off guard, especially me. I wanted to be happy for them, really, I did. But Lily and I, well, we mixed like oil and water from the get-go. One evening, during a family dinner I hosted at my grandmother's house, the tension reached a boiling point. I had spent hours preparing the meal, eager to bring a piece of home to the city. The table was set, the food laid out, a feast by any standard, or so I thought. "What is this?" Lily asked, eyeing the spread with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "It's dinner," I said, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. "Mom's recipes. Thought it'd be nice to have a taste of home." Jack dug in, praising the flavors, but Lily pushed her food around her plate, barely taking a bite. "It's quaint," she finally said, her tone implying anything but. I clenched my jaw, feeling my temper rise. "Quaint?" I echoed, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's home cooking. Real food, not some overpriced dish from a fancy restaurant." Jack shot me a look, a silent plea to keep the peace, but I was past caring. "What's wrong, Lily? Not to your taste?" Lily set her fork down, her lips a thin line. "I just prefer food with a more refined palate," she said, each word dripping with condescension. The meal ended in awkward silence, the unspoken words hanging heavy between us. It was clear Lily and I were from two different worlds, and neither of us was willing to bridge that gap. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, but nothing could have prepared me for the news that shattered the ordinary flow of my days. Mr. Harrison, Lily's grandfather, had been involved in a serious car accident. I remember standing in my kitchen when Jack called. The moment I heard his voice, thick with emotion, I knew something was terribly wrong. "Sarah, it's Mr. Harrison, he didn't make it," Jack said in a strangled voice. My heart sank, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Mr. Harrison had been like a second grandfather to me, always there with a story or a joke, his eyes twinkling with mirth. "We need to be there for Mrs. Harrison. She's all alone now," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I know. The funeral's tomorrow. Can you believe it? Just like that, he's gone, Jack replied, the pain in his voice mirroring my own. The day of the funeral was a blur, a procession of faces and condolences that seemed to blend together in a haze of grief. The Harrisons' home, usually a beacon of warmth and laughter, felt cold and empty, the air heavy with loss. Mrs. Harrison, the rock of her family, looked small and fragile, her eyes lost in sorrow. But what struck me was the undercurrent of conversation that had nothing to do with mourning or loss. I heard he left everything to her, whispered one distant relative to another, not even bothering to lower their voice enough. Yeah, but what's going to happen now? Who's going to take care of everything? Came the reply, laced with greed rather than concern. The audacity of such talk, at such a time, made my blood boil. Was there no respect for the man who had just passed? For the woman who had lost her partner of so many years? It was then that Lily found me, her expression one of irritation rather than sorrow. Sarah, what are you even doing here? You're not family. Maybe it's time you left, she said, her words sharp and unwelcome. I looked at her, incredulous. I'm here to support Mrs. Harrison, just like everyone else. Or at least, that's what I thought we were all here for, I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Lily scoffed, rolling her eyes. Please, like you being here makes any difference. Just go home, Sarah. With a heavy heart, I decided to leave, not wanting to cause a scene. But as I walked away, the snippets of conversation about assets and inheritance continued to echo in my ears, a stark reminder of the greed that often lurked just beneath the surface of familial bonds. The day after the funeral, my phone rang, slicing through the silence of my home. The screen displayed Mrs. Harrison's number, and I answered immediately, my voice thick with concern. Sarah, dear, could you come over? I need to talk to someone. Mrs. Harrison's voice trembled through the line, her usual strength buried under layers of grief and fatigue. Of course, Mrs. Harrison. I'll be right there, I replied, my heart aching for the woman who had suddenly found herself alone in the world. Arriving at her doorstep, I was greeted by a sight that tugged at my heartstrings. Mrs. Harrison stood there, a shadow of her former self, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Without a word, she ushered me inside, into the living room where so many of our neighborhood's memories had been made. Thank you for coming, Sarah. It seems you're one of the few who truly cares, she began, her voice laced with a sorrow that resonated deep within me. It's what neighbors are for, Mrs. Harrison. How are you holding up? I asked, though the question felt inadequate against the magnitude of her loss. She sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of the world. As well as can be expected, I suppose. But it's not just the loneliness, Sarah. It's everything else. The vulture circling, if you know what I mean. I nodded, understanding all too well the ugly side of human nature that tragedy often revealed. I've heard some talk, I admitted, my tone grim. People can be so cruel? Greedy? Yes, they can. And they are. Mrs. Harrison cut in, her words sharp with a bitterness that surprised me. But that's not why I asked you here. She paused, gathering her thoughts, and when she continued, her voice was steadier, imbued with a resolve that belied her frail appearance. My husband left everything to me, Sarah. The house, the savings, everything. And now, everyone's got their eyes on what they think they're owed. I reached out, placing a comforting hand over hers. But it's your right, Mrs. Harrison. He wanted you to have it. Yes, he did. And I intend to honor his wishes. But, Sarah, there's something else. She hesitated, her gaze locking with mine, a silent plea for understanding. I need someone I can trust, someone outside this madness. And I think that's you. Before I could respond, the sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, and footsteps approached. Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as they landed on me. What are you doing here? She demanded, her tone as cold as ice. I was just checking on Mrs. Harrison, I replied, my patience wearing thin at her constant hostility. Lily scoffed, dismissing my words with a wave of her hand. Well, you've checked. Now leave. We have family matters to discuss. Mrs. Harrison stood up, her stature small, but her presence commanding. Lily, Sarah is here because I invited her. She's been more of a family to me lately than my own blood. The tension in the room was palpable, a standoff between the grieving widow and the entitled granddaughter-in-law. But before the situation could escalate further, I decided to take the high road. I'll go, Mrs. Harrison. But please, call me if you need anything at all, I said, offering her a reassuring smile. In the 6 months following the uncomfortable confrontation at Mrs. Harrison's, my life seemed to drift back into a semblance of normalcy, at least on the surface. The once frequent visits to Mrs. Harrison's home ceased almost entirely. Whenever I tried calling her, I was met with the cold, impersonal tone of a disconnected line. Jack and Lily, meanwhile, became distant figures, their lives seemingly moving on without a backward glance towards me. Jack even went as far as to tell me not to call him anymore, a request that stung more than I cared to admit. One evening, I saw Mrs. Harrison and Lily near my house. The sight of Mrs. Harrison shocked me. The vibrant, spirited woman I remembered had been replaced by someone much frilier, her face drawn and pale, her body seemingly weighed down by more than just age. Mrs. Harrison, what happened? Are you all right? I asked, my concern mounting at the sight of her. Lily, ever the gatekeeper, was quick to answer. We're making some repairs at the house. It's going to be dusty, and I don't want Grandma breathing all that in. Thought she could stay with you for a bit, she explained, her tone suggesting this was more of an imposition than a request. Despite the surprise, I didn't hesitate. Of course, she can stay here. For as long as she needs, I said, turning to Mrs. Harrison with a reassuring smile. Lily didn't waste any time. Almost immediately, she brought over a few small bags containing Mrs. Harrison's essentials. The repairs should only take a couple of months. I'll give you a call when it's all clear for her to come back, she said, her voice carrying a finality that suggested the topic was not open for discussion. The moment Mrs. Harrison crossed the threshold into my home, something shifted. It wasn't just a physical move from one place to another, it was as if she was stepping out of a shadow that had held her captive far too long. When she sat down, the dam broke, and her tears flowed freely, each one a testament to the silent struggles she'd endured. Wrapped in a hug, Mrs. Harrison's voice was muffled, but her words were clear enough to send a chill down my spine. I've been living like a prisoner, Sarah. Couldn't step outside without asking, like I'm some kind of hostage in my own home. Night after night, those parties, the noise. And there's no repairs, none. It's all a sham. Lily, she wants me gone. Hearing her speak, my heart sank. Mrs. Harrison, the woman who'd always greeted me with a smile, had been suffering in silence, tormented in what should have been her sanctuary. This is unbelievable, I found myself saying, anger simmering beneath my shock. We should call the cops, Mrs. Harrison. They need to know about this. But she shook her head, a determined glint in her weary eyes. No, dear. I've got a plan. A better one. But I need your help. Can you call my lawyer? Ask him to come here? Her request took me aback, but I nodded. Of course, I'll call him first thing. As promised, I reached out to her lawyer, a man Mrs. Harrison had trusted for years. When he arrived, I offered them privacy, stepping away as they delved into discussions I wasn't privy to. Their murmured conversation, though inaudible, was a clear sign of the wheels of justice beginning to turn. Months had passed since Mrs. Harrison moved into my home, and the so-called repairs on her house showed no signs of progress. The silence on Lily's end was deafening, and my patience was wearing thin. Mrs. Harrison, for all her gratitude for my shelter, carried a sadness in her eyes that spoke volumes of the situation's toll on her. One evening, as Mrs. Harrison and I sat in the living room, a rare moment of peace enveloping us, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. Mrs. Harrison, something's not right. There's been no word from Lily, and your house, it looks untouched. Are you sure there's really repairs going on? I asked, the concern evident in my voice. She sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of her worries. I've had my doubts, dear. But what can I do? I'm just an old lady, and they've made it clear I'm not welcome in my own home. Her words stirred something within me, a fierce determination I hadn't known I possessed. Well, I'm not just going to sit back and watch this happen. It's time we found out what's really going on, I declared, my resolve hardening. The following day, I made my way to Mrs. Harrison's house. The sight that greeted me was exactly as I had feared. The house was silent, no workers in sight, no signs of any ongoing repairs. Just as I was about to leave, Lily and Jack pulled up in their car. The look on Lily's face when she saw me was a mix of surprise and irritation. Sarah, what are you doing here? Spying on us now? Lily snapped, her tone accusatory. I'm not spying. I'm looking for answers. Mrs. Harrison deserves to know what's happening with her house. I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Jack, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke up. Look, Sarah, this doesn't concern you. Just leave it be. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Doesn't concern me? Mrs. Harrison is living with me because you two claimed her house needed repairs. But I don't see any repairs happening. Lily rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed. Well, plans change. We've decided to do the repairs later. Grandma can stay with you a bit longer. That's not your decision to make. It's her house, her life. You can't just uproot her because it's convenient for you, I retorted, anger boiling within me. Jack stepped forward, trying to play the mediator. Sarah, let's just calm down and talk about this. We don't want to make a scene. A scene? You're the ones making a scene of her life. I won't stand by and watch you treat Mrs. Harrison like this, I declared, standing my ground. The conversation went back and forth, but my mind was made up. Mrs. Harrison had been through enough, and it was time someone took a stand for her. The next day, my phone rang. The screen flashed Lily's name, and a knot formed in my stomach before I even answered. What she asked next sent shockwaves through me. Look, I need a favor. Big one. Confirm Grandma's lost it, mentally. Say she needs to be in a home. I'll make it worth your while, 10 grand. Lily's voice was all business, cold and calculating. I felt my blood boil. Are you out of your mind? You think I'd sell out Mrs. Harrison like that? For money? I was seething, barely containing my anger. Just think about it, okay? It's easy money, she pressed, clearly not understanding the gravity of her request. Think about it? No, you listen, and you listen good. This is sick, Lily. Don't you ever ask me to do something like this again. Ever. I snapped back, my words laced with disgust. I ended the call, my hands trembling with rage. How could she? How could anyone be so heartless? When I told Mrs. Harrison about the call, I expected anger, maybe shock. But she just nodded, her expression resigned. I'm not surprised, dear. It's been clear to me for a while now, they see me as nothing more than an inconvenience. An obstacle to their greed. Her calmness in the face of such betrayal was both heartbreaking and infuriating. They don't deserve you, Mrs. Harrison. Not a bit, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's all right, Sarah. I've made my peace with it. In fact, I've already taken steps to ensure they can't harm me further, she revealed, a hint of defiance in her tone. What do you mean? I asked, curious despite the heaviness in my heart. I've transferred everything, my house, my savings, all of it, to you. Left just enough for myself to cover a stay in a nice nursing home, one that I picked out. But after what Lily just tried to pull. Maybe I rushed that decision. she explained, her eyes searching mine for understanding. I was floored. Mrs. Harrison, why me? You barely know me. Because you showed me kindness when they showed me greed. You offered me a home when they tried to take mine away. You're my family now, Sarah, in every way that matters, she said, her voice steady and sincere. The weight of her words, of her trust, was overwhelming. You don't have to go to any home, not if you don't want to. Stay here, with me. We'll figure this out together, I offered, more determined than ever to protect her. Mrs. Harrison smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I'd like that very much, dear. Thank you. The day Mrs. Harrison asked me to gather all her relatives at the lawyer's office, I knew we were on the cusp of a seismic shift. I sent out the invitations, including to my brother, Jack, and his wife, Lily, whose actions had precipitated this whole affair. As we entered the lawyer's office on the day, the air was thick with tension, the kind you could cut with a knife. Mrs. Harrison, frail but fierce in her determination, held on to my arm, drawing strength from my presence. Once everyone was seated, the lawyer began, but it was Mrs. Harrison who took control of the room. I brought you all here to announce my decision, she started, her voice stronger than I'd heard in months. Over the past few years, I've seen true colors shown, care withheld, and greed run rampant in this family. There was an audible shift in the room, discomfort and denial mingling in the charged atmosphere. I have decided to disinherit my daughter, my son, and my grandchildren, she continued, each word deliberate, her gaze unwavering. The only person who has shown me kindness and decency is Sarah. She's my heir. Jack and Lily's faces turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before, their outrage palpable. Murmurs of disbelief and anger bubbled up among the relatives, but Mrs. Harrison wasn't finished. Furthermore, I demand financial compensation from Lily and Jack for the distress they've caused me and for them to vacate my house immediately, she added, the lawyer nodding in agreement beside her. You can't do this to us. Your family. Lily shrieked, her voice shrill with desperation. Family? Mrs. Harrison echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. This is what family does? No. Sarah has shown me more compassion and respect than any of you. The lawyer, sensing the situation spiraling, stepped in. If we cannot proceed civilly, I will not hesitate to call the authorities, he warned, his voice a calm in the storm. Well, we just left. After Mrs. Harrison and I had spent a year and a half as more than just neighbors, but as family, her health took a turn for the worse. It was a tough blow, watching her grow weaker, spending her final days in the hospital. I was there as often as I could manage, holding her hand, talking about everything and nothing, trying to offer comfort in the face of the inevitable. A week after one of those quiet visits, she passed away. I took it upon myself to arrange a proper send-off for her. Despite reaching out through the lawyer to all her relatives, the day of the funeral came and went without a single one of them showing up to pay their respects. On the day of the funeral, my phone rang. It was Lily, the voice on the other end sounding desperate and defeated. I don't know how to say this, but we're in a bad spot. Jack lost his job, and we're behind on everything. Can we live in the house? We've got nowhere else. Her request left me in a tight spot, emotions and memories clashing like thunder. Lily, you know that was never my decision to make. Mrs. Harrison made her choices clear, and they were about more than just a roof over your head. It was about respect, love, something you all seem to forget. But we're family, she protested weakly, the argument sounding hollow even to her ears. Family? I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. Family doesn't do what you did. She needed you, and you turned your back. You made your choice, Lily. Now, you have to live with it. Ending the call, I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. It wasn't just about the house or the money, it was about the values Mrs. Harrison stood for, the lessons she taught me about kindness, integrity, and standing up for what's right. My name is Diana. Growing up, I was the princess of a castle I barely understood. My parents, bless their souls, had more money than some countries, but they made sure I knew the worth of every penny. Money talks, but wisdom listens, Dad would say, and Mom insisted on me knowing how to budget before I even knew how to properly spell luxury. Life was a fairy tale until it wasn't. At 12, their private jet crashed, and my fairy tale turned into a stark reality overnight. Grandma took me in. We lived in a modest house far removed from the opulence I was used to. It was a different kind of life, one where luxury was in the love and care, not the material. My inheritance was a distant promise, locked away until I turned 25. So, I adapted, learned, and thrived under Grandma's guidance. College was my escape and my grounding. That's where Alex came into the picture. He was as far from my world as one could get, a scholarship kid with a heart of gold and a wit that could cut through any pretense. We clicked, in a way I never expected. Bringing him home to meet Grandma was a nerve-wracking experience. I hadn't told him about the money. Better he doesn't know, not yet, Grandma had advised, and I saw the wisdom in her words. I wanted Alex to love me for me, not my bank account. Grandma, this is Alex. I introduced them, my stomach in knots. Nice to meet you, ma'am, Alex said, extending a hand that Grandma shook warmly. Sit, sit, Grandma gestured, her eyes twinkling as she took in Alex's nervous posture. You're the young man who's stolen my granddaughter's heart. Alex blushed, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. I guess you could say that, ma'am. We sat down, and the conversation flowed more easily than I dared hope. Grandma shared stories of my parents, of me as a child, stories that made Alex laugh and look at me with a warmth that made my heart swell. You've got a good one here, Grandma said, nodding towards me but looking at Alex. Takes after her mother, strong and kind. But don't you let her fool you, she's got a bit of mischief in her too. I can see that, Alex chuckled, squeezing my hand under the table. The evening went on, filled with laughter and shared stories. Alex fit into our world like he was always meant to be there. As he helped Grandma with the dishes afterward, I knew I had made the right choice in bringing him into this part of my life. Walking him out later, Alex turned to me, a serious look on his face. Your grandma's amazing, you know? And hearing about your parents, your life. I feel like I understand you more. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I'm glad, Alex. There's a lot to me, more than meets the eye, I guess. He smiled, pulling me into a hug. I'm here for all of it, every layer. Doesn't matter what's in your bank account. It's you I care about. I hugged him back, tighter than I ever had before. In that moment, I knew I could trust him, but I also knew the weight of the secret I was keeping. It was a delicate balance, one I hoped wouldn't tip and spill over. The ride to Alex's parents' house was a quiet one, filled with the kind of silence that's too thick to cut through. I could tell Alex was nervous, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. You sure you're ready for this? I asked, trying to break the ice. Yeah, just, my mom can be a bit much. Don't take anything she says to heart, okay? Alex's attempt at a reassuring smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The house loomed ahead, grand and imposing. As we pulled up, my stomach twisted into knots. This was it, no turning back now. We were barely through the door when Alex's mom, Gloria, made her entrance. Her eyes landed on me like two laser beams, sizing me up in a way that made my skin crawl. So, this is the girl you've been hiding, she said, her voice as cold as the marble floors. Mom, this is... Alex began, but Gloria waved him off. I know who she is. Come, let's sit. I prepared some tea. Her command was not to be ignored, leading us into a living room that felt more like a showroom. The tea was served, and Gloria wasted no time. I hear you were raised by your grandmother. Must have been quite the humble upbringing, she said, the word humble sounding more like an insult. I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my cool. It was. My grandma taught me a lot about life. Important stuff, not just fluff. Gloria's lips twitched in a smirk. I see. And your parents? Gone too soon, I heard. Tragic, really. How does one cope without the proper guidance? Alex jumped in, clearly uncomfortable. Mom, that's enough. Let's not. No, it's okay, Alex. I interrupted, feeling a surge of defiance. Yeah, my folks are gone, and yeah, it was tough. But I got through it. Made me who I am. Gloria sipped her tea, her gaze never wavering. Interesting. And what about your future, dear? Any plans, or are you just riding along on my son's coattails? That stung. I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I was here. I've got plans. Big ones. And I don't need to ride on anyone's coattails to make them happen. The air was thick with tension. Alex, bless him, tried to change the subject. Mom, let's not do this, okay? We're here to enjoy each other's company. Gloria set down her teacup, a calculated move. I'm merely trying to understand the woman my son has chosen. You can't fault a mother for caring about her child's future. The back and forth felt endless, a verbal tug-of-war where no one was winning. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, Alex's sister, Lily, made her entrance. Her eyes were curious, but held an edge of judgment that matched her mother's. So, you're the famous girlfriend. Heard a lot about you. Not all good, I might add, Lily said, her voice dripping with disdain. I was about to snap back when Alex stood up. That's enough, both of you. We came here in good faith, to share a part of our lives with you. If that's not something you can respect, then maybe we should leave. The rest of the visit was awkward, to say the least. Conversations felt forced, every laugh a little too loud. But Alex held my hand under the table, a silent promise that we were in this together. As we left, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and frustration. I'm sorry about that, Alex said once we were in the car. They can be a bit intense. I sighed, watching the lights of the house fade in the rearview mirror. It's not your fault. But man, your mom and sister, there's something else. Alex chuckled, a sad sort of sound. Yeah, they are. But hey, we survived, right? Survived and stronger. I agreed, leaning my head against the window. The night sky was clear, the stars shining bright. Maybe it was a sign. No matter how tough things got, there'd always be a way through. The warning came swift and sharp, like a slap to the face, at our next awkward family meetup. Gloria, my future mother-in-law, didn't waste any time laying down the law. If you two are serious about getting married, we're getting a prenup signed, she declared, her eyes drilling into me as if daring me to object. I kept my cool, shrugged, and let out a low, fine by me. I'm not after your son's money. Alex looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Once we were out of there, he was all apologies and promises. My mom won't get in our way, I promise. We'll be happy, he said, his eyes pleading for me to believe him. The wedding planning sailed smoothly enough, but the big day itself? That's when the storm hit. Lily, the sister-in-law-to-be, got sloshed beyond belief and decided it was showtime. In the middle of our reception, she staggered up, glass in hand, and slurred out accusations loud enough for the back row to hear. This one's a gold digger. Doesn't know the first thing about our kind of life. Illiterate, trying to snag my brother's cash. After that, there were other antics, molesting guests, and other things that are not customary to talk about in decent society. I felt my face flush hot with anger and humiliation. Without a second thought, I pulled out my phone and called the cops. This drama needed an audience, and I wasn't about to let Lily's performance go unchecked. The aftermath was a hurricane of accusations and threats. Gloria vowed revenge for the disgrace I'd brought upon their family. You've made a mockery of us. The press will have a field day with my daughter's antics, thanks to you. Alex was torn, trying to play peacemaker in a war that had no room for neutrality. I saw the strain in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of his family's drama and his desire to keep us afloat. But I stood my ground, my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about drawing a line, about not letting wealth or the lack thereof dictate how I was treated. As the dust settled, and the night grew quiet, Alex and I sat amidst the wreckage of what was supposed to be our happiest day. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice heavy with unshed tears. "I never wanted any of this." I took his hand, feeling the rough edges of our new reality. "We'll get through this. But things need to change. Starting with setting boundaries with your family." The vow we made that night wasn't just about staying together. It was about fighting for the respect we deserved, about not letting old money or old grudges define our future. 2 years slipped by since we said "I do," and those vows felt heavier every day. Gloria practically vanished from our lives, and honestly, I didn't miss her one bit. But it wasn't just her absence that marked those years, it was Alex's changing attitude that really drove the wedge between us. He'd come home late, if at all, muttering excuses about work that didn't quite add up. The warmth we once shared cooled into courtesy, and then, even that faded. The tipping point came one night when he threw his jacket on the chair like it had personally offended him and said something I never thought I'd hear. "You know, I could have done better. Married someone with a bit more class, more in line with my circle." His words stung like a slap. I stood there, gobsmacked, wanting to scream, to tell him about the fortune that was mine. But Grandma's voice echoed in my head, advising patience, to see Alex for who he truly was. So, I swallowed the truth and the hurt, biting back tears. I thought maybe, just maybe, if we had a child, it might bridge the gap between us, remind him of the love that brought us together. "Alex, don't you think it's time we thought about having a baby? It could bring us closer," I ventured one evening, hoping to spark something of the man I fell in love with. His reaction was like a cold shower. "A baby? Now? Don't be ridiculous. We're not ready for that. Not by a long shot." That conversation shut me down. It wasn't just the refusal, it was the disdain, the way he made it clear that what I wanted, what I thought could save us, was nothing but a foolish fantasy. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months of silence, of living side by side but not together. Each rude remark, every late night, added another brick to the wall between us. I confided in Grandma, poured my heart out over cups of tea that had gone cold before I could finish them. "He's not the man I married, Grandma. I don't know if he ever was." She listened, her eyes sad but understanding. "You can't make someone be who you want them to be, darling. Sometimes, we see what we want to see, until we can't ignore the truth any longer." Her words, though heavy, carried a sliver of relief. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't asking for too much. I just wanted a partner, someone who saw me as an equal, who respected me. But as the days passed, it became clearer that wasn't who Alex was. Not anymore, if he ever had been. The idea of leaving crossed my mind more times than I cared to admit. But every time it did, I pushed it away, hoping against hope that something would change, that the man I loved would find his way back to me. The vibe was set for a killer party. I'd gone all out for Alex's birthday bash, hoping to bring back a spark into what had turned into a pretty mundane marriage. No expense was spared, and the guest list was a who's who of our closest pals. Notably missing from the invite list were Gloria and Lily, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Their drama was the last thing I needed ruining the night. Alex was in high spirits, soaking in the adoration and well wishes from everyone. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the honeymoon phase, all laughter and inside jokes. But that bubble burst the second Gloria and Lily crashed the party, uninvited but clearly expecting to be welcomed. Turns out, Alex had gone behind my back and invited them, hoping to avoid any family fallout. Their presence turned the atmosphere tense. Lily, in true form, made a beeline for the booze, dressed in an outfit that screamed "look at me," and not in a good way. Gloria's snide remarks flew under the radar, each one a veiled jab at me or our marriage. As the night wore on, Lily's antics escalated. Fueled by champagne and a need to be the center of attention, she started a rant about me not fitting into their family, how I was unworthy of their name. It was a mess, and Alex was nowhere to be found, too busy playing the good son to notice the circus unfolding. The climax of the evening was when Lily, a few sheets to the wind, decided to air out some dirty laundry. Waving around some documents, she slurred out insults, each word a knife. The spectacle ended with her stumbling into the pool, documents flying everywhere. I rushed over, more out of curiosity than concern, and gathered the scattered papers. My heart sank as I pieced together what they were. Divorce papers. Signed. By Alex. It was like a punch to the gut, each signature a betrayal. I stood there, numb, as the reality of the situation washed over me. My husband, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, had decided our journey was over without so much as a word to me. The party around me faded into a blur as I clutched the documents, Alex's signature glaring up at me, confirming what I didn't want to believe. This wasn't just a party to remember, it was the end of everything I thought we had. In the aftermath of the pool incident, I sought clarity amidst the chaos. My heart pounded as I approached Alex, holding the soaked documents that had unwittingly unveiled a truth I was unprepared for. "Alex, what's this about?" I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt, thrusting the divorce papers toward him. Before he could respond, his mother interjected with a smugness that made my skin crawl. "Oh, dear, looks like your little scheme didn't work out, did it? Alex is leaving you. Thought you could trap him with a baby for his money?" I stared at Alex, searching his eyes for any sign of the man I married. But he couldn't meet my gaze, his silence more telling than any words. With resignation, I signed the divorce papers. They were just a formality now, a closing chapter of a book I no longer wished to be part of. As the dust settled, Grandma approached, her presence a calming force. She didn't need to say anything, her eyes conveyed volumes of empathy, understanding, and an unspoken support that bolstered my resolve. It was then she decided to reveal the truth, not just to me, but to everyone present. "She doesn't need any of your money," Grandma declared, her voice steady and strong. "In a month, she turns 25 and will inherit a fortune far beyond what you could imagine. She's been raised to value people over wealth, to seek out genuine connections rather than financial gain." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Gloria's face morphed from smugness to shock, then to a desperate kind of greed, as she quickly began backpedaling, her apologies as transparent as they were insincere. Alex, too, seemed suddenly eager to rewrite the narrative, insisting his intentions were never to hurt me, that he was merely influenced by his mother. But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the stark reality of our relationship and the motivations behind it. I met their apologies with a quiet smile, not out of forgiveness, but out of an inner peace that came from understanding my worth, independent of the wealth that awaited me. "You've shown me your true colors," I said, my voice imbued with a newfound strength. "As for surprises, well, I've prepared another one for you." And at that moment, a loud honk echoed through the tension. Outside, a sleek, luxury car rolled up to the gate, the one I had secretly bought for Alex as a surprise. The irony wasn't lost on me. I couldn't help a bitter laugh as I excused myself, stepping outside to confront the final act of this drama. There it was, the epitome of luxury on four wheels, a symbol of the love I thought we shared, now just another piece in the game of pretense and betrayal. Without a second thought, I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and unyielding beneath me, much like my resolve. Grandma, ever my rock, joined me, her presence a silent testament to the strength and dignity that ran in our blood. Turning to face the house, I saw Alex and his mother at the door, their expressions a mix of confusion and awe. "Everything from now on goes through my lawyer," I called out to them, my voice clear and devoid of the warmth it once carried. "And don't worry about my stuff. I'll have a courier pick it up." Their faces, once smug and self-assured, now painted a picture of realization and loss. Not just of the wealth they coveted, but of the person they underestimated. With that, I turned the key, the car's engine purring to life, a sweet sound that promised freedom and new beginnings. Grandma and I shared a look, a silent agreement that this was the first step toward a future unburdened by deceit and manipulation. After the revelations and dramatic exits, the air seemed clearer, as if the truth had not only unveiled the greed and deceit but also cleansed the path ahead. It wasn't long before the first test of my newfound resolve came knocking, or rather, calling. The phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the calm like a knife. On the other end was none other than Lily, her voice dripping with an unfamiliar sweetness. "Hey, I just wanted to, clear the air between us. We're practically the same age, right? We could be friends." I couldn't help but let out a short, disbelieving laugh. The contrast between this sugary tone and her usual disdain was stark. "Friends?" I echoed, the word feeling foreign. "You mean like how friends don't badmouth each other at parties or try to humiliate them in front of everyone?" There was a pause, a moment where I imagined I could hear the cogs turning in her head as she searched for a response. "Well, water under the bridge and all that," she attempted feebly. "Water into the pool, you mean?" I shot back, unable to resist the jab. The silence that followed was telling. It was clear that my refusal to play along had derailed her plans. "Fine, be that way," she snapped, her veneer of niceness crumbling away. "You'll regret this." I hung up, feeling a mix of amusement and sadness. It was a stark reminder of the facades people wear and the lengths they'll go to when faced with the consequences of their actions. The temptation to retaliate was there, a nagging thought in the back of my mind. I posted a video on social media of her falling into the pool. It went viral like wildfire. Within an hour, 1,000 people had liked it. My sister-in-law was internet famous. She tried to call me, demanding I take it down, but I just blocked her. I'm done with her fake sweetness and her nasty attitude. A week after that, my phone rang with a number I knew all too well. It was Gloria, her voice unnaturally sweet, offering an olive branch she hoped I'd grasp. "Let's put the past behind us. For Alex's sake, can't we reconcile?" she suggested, as if the wounds were mere scratches that could heal with a band-aid of words. "No, Gloria. That ship has sailed," I replied, firm but not unkind. There was no anger in my voice, just a resolute peace. "I wish Alex well, but our paths are diverging. I'm looking forward, not back." Not long after, Alex made his own attempts at a reunion. One morning, I found a bouquet of flowers at my doorstep, the card bearing a simple "I'm sorry, please come back" message. The sight of them sparked more anger than affection. Without a second thought, I tossed them into the trash. His efforts didn't stop there. He tried to visit, showing up unannounced with the hope of talking things through. But I wasn't the same person he left behind. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like an intrusion. One evening, as he made yet another uninvited appearance, I met him at the door, with a resolve as hard as steel. "If you don't stop this, I'm going to the police," I warned, my voice steady and firm. "Your apologies can't undo what's been done. It's over, Alex. Really over." The gravity of my words finally seemed to reach him. His shoulders slumped, and with a final, lingering look, he turned and walked away. That was the last I saw of him. In the time that followed, I threw myself into charity work. It became my passion, my purpose. Helping those truly in need, connecting with people who valued kindness over wealth, brought me a joy I hadn't known was missing. Living with Grandma, I found peace in our quiet routine. We'd sit and plan our next project, our next way to make a difference. It was during these moments I realized this was where I was meant to be. I had no illusions about the road ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, perhaps even heartache. But I also knew it would be filled with joy, with moments of unbridled happiness, and the kind of love that enriches the soul. And so, I live my life looking forward, not back. I work, I help, and I hope. I believe in a future where I'll find true love, not defined by wealth or status, but by genuine connection. And yes, one day, I'll have those 3 beautiful children I dream of. But for now, I'm content. I'm building a life of purpose, surrounded by love that doesn't ask for anything in return. This isn't just the end of a chapter, it's the beginning of a whole new book. And I'm the one writing it. Growing up in a small town with folks who believed in hard work over anything fancy, I was your typical girl next door, Margie. My family wasn't rich, but we were happy, and they instilled in me the value of hard work from a young age. After college, chasing a slice of independence, I moved to a bigger city, a place that felt like a different world. It was there my life took a turn I never saw coming. I landed a job as a sales manager at a big company, which was a big deal for a small-town girl like me. The job was demanding, but I thrived on the challenge. Unlike my peers, who were all about hitting the clubs after work, I was more likely to be found curled up with a book or working overtime. That was until David walked into my life. David was everything I didn't know I was looking for. He was charming, with a smile that could light up the darkest rooms, and a sense of humor that could make anyone laugh. We met through work, and what started as casual coffee breaks turned into long dinners, and before I knew it, I was head over heels. I can't believe how lucky I am, I remember telling him one evening as we walked along the river, the city lights reflecting like stars in the water. Believe it, Margie. You're the best thing that's happened to me, he said, his hand finding mine. It wasn't long before we got married. It was a simple ceremony, nothing too fancy, just how we liked it. Our daughter, Lily, came into our lives not long after, and suddenly, our little family felt complete. Life was good. David and I found joy in the simple things. We'd take Lily out on weekends with our mobile home, exploring the outskirts of the city, or sometimes just walking in the park, letting her chase the pigeons while we walked hand in hand. But it wasn't all play. Balancing work and family life was tough. After Lily was born, I switched to working half days to be there for her more. David was supportive, always saying, "Do what you need to, babe. We'll make it work." And we did. We were a team, tackling household chores together, making meals, and taking care of Lily. David's parents were a big help too. They adored Lily and were always there when we needed a hand. "You two are doing great," David's mom would often say. "It's not easy, but you're making it look like it is." It felt like we had everything figured out. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, David mentioned working late more often. "The project's picking up steam. Gonna need to put in extra hours," he said, almost apologetically. I understood, or at least I tried to. "We'll manage. Just don't work yourself too hard," I replied, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. The shift was gradual, like the slow buildup of clouds before a storm, unnoticed until the downpour is upon you. David's late nights became more frequent, and the warmth that used to fill our home started to cool. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was just the stress of his job. But deep down, I knew something was off. Lily started asking more about her dad. "Why isn't Daddy home for dinner?" Her innocent questions were like punches to my gut. I did my best to soothe her. "Daddy's got to work, sweetie. He'll be home soon." But the soon stretched longer and longer. One day, I got held up at work, something I couldn't avoid. I called David, hoping he could pick up Lily from school. His reaction was like a slap across my face. "What do you mean you're stuck? Can't you see I'm swamped? Handle your own mess," he snapped over the phone, before hanging up. Tears stung my eyes, not just from his words, but from the shock of hearing him talk to me like that. I'd never seen this side of him. Panicking, I called his mom. "Hey, it's me. I'm in a bind. Can you grab Lily from school?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right with David?" she replied, concern evident in her voice. Yeah, just work stuff. Thanks, I owe you one, I managed, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. As days turned into weeks, David's detachment grew. He wasn't just absent physically, but emotionally too. Our home felt like a house with no life in it. I tried talking to him, reaching out, trying to bridge the gap that kept widening between us. David, we need to talk. Whatever this is, it's not working. Lily misses you, I miss you, I said one night, mustering all the courage I had. He barely looked at me, his eyes glued to his phone. What do you want from me, Margie? I'm here, aren't I? Just tired, that's all, he muttered, his tone dismissive. But that's just it, you're here but not really. You don't talk to us, to me. What's going on? I pressed, desperate for any crumb of affection or concern. Nothing's going on. Drop it, he snapped, standing up to leave the room. His indifference was a bitter pill to swallow. I lay awake that night, listening to the silence of our home, a stark contrast to the laughter and love that used to fill it. The change in David wasn't just hurting me, it was affecting Lily too. She became quieter, her bright spark dimming with each day her father pushed us away. It wasn't just the emotional distance, David stopped helping around the house altogether. Tasks we used to share now fell squarely on my shoulders. I felt like a single parent. Why doesn't Daddy play with me anymore? Lily's voice broke through my thoughts one evening as I washed the dishes. I turned to her, forcing a smile. Daddy's just busy, honey. But we can play, what do you say? Your choice of game, I offered, trying to mask the ache in my heart. She nodded, a small smile on her lips, but her eyes were searching, looking for the father she adored and missed. The divide between us grew, and with it, my loneliness. I turned to David's parents for support, spending more time at their place just to feel some connection to the man I married. They noticed the change too, but were at a loss on how to help. It's just a rough patch, dear. Every marriage has them. David's mom tried to reassure me, but her eyes told a different story, one filled with concern and uncertainty. As the days passed, the silence in our home grew louder, a stark reminder of the rift between David and me. I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to how they were. In a desperate attempt to break through the ice that had formed around us, I planned a surprise. I bought tickets to a local music show, thinking it could reignite the spark we once had. The moment I told David about the surprise, his reaction was far from what I had hoped for. A music show? Seriously, Margie? You know I'm swamped with work. I don't have time for this, he said, barely looking up from his laptop. But it's been ages since we did something as a family. Lily would love it, and I thought it could be a nice break for us, together, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt his words caused. Great, another thing to add to my never-ending to-do list. Thanks, but I'll pass. You two go and have fun, he said dismissively, turning his attention back to his work. I stood there, feeling like a fool. The rejection stung, not just because he didn't want to go, but because it felt like he didn't want to spend time with us at all. Lily, sensing the tension, came over and tugged at my hand. Is Daddy not coming with us, Mommy? She asked, her big eyes filled with confusion. I forced a smile, bending down to her level. It's just going to be a girls' night out. We'll have fun, just you and me, I said, trying to sound more excited than I felt. Lily nodded, though I could tell she was disappointed. It broke my heart to see her having to adjust to this new version of her father. As David's absences became more frequent, I found myself fighting a lonely battle to keep our family together. He started leaving for the entire weekend, claiming work demanded it. Another weekend? David, this is getting ridiculous. You're never home anymore. Lily keeps asking about you. I confronted him one evening. Look, I don't need this right now, Margie. Work is crazy, and I'm doing the best I can. Maybe if you were a little more understanding instead of constantly nagging, things would be better, he retorted, his words dripping with annoyance. Nagging? I'm trying to have a conversation about our family, about us. You're hardly here, and when you are, you're like a ghost. How is that fair to Lily or me? I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Just leave it, Margie. You wouldn't understand, he said before walking out, leaving me standing there, fuming and feeling more alone than ever. The evenings he claimed to spend with colleagues stretched later and later, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more he wasn't telling me. The loneliness was suffocating, and I found solace in the only place I could, with Lily and David's parents. During one of our dinners at David's parents' house, his mother noticed my subdued mood. Margie, dear, you barely touched your food. Is everything all right? She asked, her voice full of concern. I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with my problems, but the words spilled out. I feel like I'm losing him, and I don't know what to do. He's always working or out, and when he's home, it's like he's not really here. Lily misses him, and I miss my husband. David's father, who had been quietly listening, chimed in. Have you tried talking to him, really sitting him down and telling him how you feel? I let out a humorless laugh. Talking to David? It's like talking to a wall these days. He doesn't listen, or worse, he gets angry. I'm at my wit's end here. David's increasing late nights and vague excuses pushed me to a decision I never thought I'd make. Hiring a private investigator felt like crossing an invisible line, but the need to understand his actions overshadowed my reservations. Weeks went by with a strange mix of anticipation and dread until the unexpected happened. Our anniversary was approaching, and David surprised me with an invitation to celebrate at an upscale restaurant, promising a weekend together just like old times. I couldn't hide my excitement. Really, David? Just us, like before? I asked, hardly believing the shift in his attitude. Yeah, thought it'd be nice. A break from all the craziness, he replied, his tone casual, almost nonchalant. With renewed hope, I arranged for David's parents to look after Lily, sharing my joyous news. The day arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement. The restaurant was as beautiful as promised, creating a backdrop that felt like a step into our past, a reminder of better days. David was already there, waiting. His gesture of offering me a glass of wine took me by surprise. Come on, let's celebrate. Just this once, he urged when he saw my hesitation. I laughed, a bit uneasy. You know I'm not much for drinking, but okay, just this once, I agreed, wanting to make the most of this rare moment between us. The evening was a blur of wine and toasts. David kept filling my glass, each time insisting, to us. It felt like a dream, our problems momentarily washed away by the ambience and alcohol. But as the night wore on, I felt increasingly unwell, a heaviness dragging me down into a drowsy haze. David, I don't feel so good. I think I need to lie down, I mumbled, struggling to keep my eyes open. Don't worry, I got you. Let's get you home, he said, his voice distant as he helped me into the car. The world outside the car window slipped into darkness as I fell into a troubled sleep, only to be jolted awake by a sudden stop. The air was cold, and I was barely conscious when David dragged me out of the car and onto a bench. Through the fog of my mind, I heard his words, sharp and clear, cutting deeper than any knife. You're just so tiring, Margie. Always there, always expecting so much. I can't do this anymore. His words were a cruel echo in the darkness as I tried to process them, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The world spun, and I felt myself slipping away, his voice the last thing I clung to before darkness claimed me completely. Waking up in the clinic was like trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The pounding in my head matched the confusion swirling through my mind. There, beside me, stood my mother-in-law, her face etched with worry. You're awake, thank God, she sighed, a hand clutching her heart. We found you in a bad part of town, no bag, no ID, nothing. What on earth happened? I tried to sit up, the effort sending waves of nausea through me. I was with David. We had dinner for our anniversary. He said he'd take me home. I managed, the words sounding hollow even to me. Her brows knitted in confusion. But that can't be. David's been out of town. He called yesterday to check on Lily. Said he was sorry he couldn't be here. That didn't make any sense. My head spun not just from the pain but from the stark disbelief. But he was there, we had dinner, I trailed off, the reality sinking in. My own husband's actions were a mystery, his alibi a lie. The worry in her eyes deepened. Let's get you home. We can sort this out later. How's Lily? That was the first coherent thought I had. My daughter, my little girl, was she okay? She's fine, dear. Been asking for you. Let's get you better so you can see her. She reassured me, helping me to my feet. The days that followed were a blur of rest and whispered conversations. I stayed with my mother-in-law, the atmosphere charged with unasked questions. Once I felt stronger, I knew what I had to do. I called the detective I had hired weeks ago, the one I hoped would shed light on David's mysterious behavior. Margie, I have the report. We need to meet. The detective's voice was grave over the phone, promising answers I wasn't sure I was ready for. I met him at a quiet cafe. The envelope he handed me felt like it weighed a ton. What's in here? My voice was barely a whisper, fear and anticipation battling within me. Take your time with it. It's a lot to process, he cautioned, his eyes not hiding his concern. Back at my mother-in-law's house, I braced myself for the worst. The envelope contained photos, receipts, a detailed account of David's comings and goings, evidence of a life I was not a part of, a betrayal laid bare on paper. My hands shook as I absorbed every word, every image. This was the proof of the lie my marriage had become. The man I thought I knew, the life I thought we had built together, it was all a facade. As I drove to the address the detective had given me, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but above all, a fierce determination to confront the truth. The evening air felt heavy as I parked outside the nondescript apartment building. With each step towards the door, my resolve hardened. The door was surprisingly unlocked, a foreboding welcome to the scene I was about to witness. Inside, I found them, David and his brightly-haired mistress, lounging as if they owned the world. The shock on David's face upon seeing me was almost satisfying, almost enough to dull the sharp edge of betrayal. So this is the hard work that's been keeping you busy every night, huh? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice, nor did I want to. The woman, with her pink hair and bright suit, just smirked at me, arrogance dripping from every pore. You shouldn't have come here. It would have been easier for you to just disappear, she sneered, making my blood boil. I turned to David, my heart aching with the betrayal. How could you do this? To me, to us? I demanded, though a part of me doubted any answer could ease the pain. She laughed, a sound so cold it sent shivers down my spine. Because you've been in the way of our happiness. We've wanted you gone for a long time, she said, her cruelty cutting deep. But I wasn't there to break. I stood my ground, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know all about your plans. I'm not here to beg or cry. I've seen the evidence. I know about the poison, and the police do too. I revealed the evidence I had gathered, the blood tests showing the presence of psychotropic substances, the detailed report from the detective outlining David's betrayals, and the video evidence collected by the police that incontrovertibly showed David's attempts to harm me. Their faces fell, but it was the mistress who recovered first. You can't prove a thing. You're out of your depth, she hissed, but her bravado couldn't mask the fear in her eyes. I pulled out my phone, showing them the recordings of their plotting, their plans to get rid of me. It's all here. The police have everything they need. And there's more, much more. David tried to speak, but the woman cut him off, still playing the queen of denial. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" She spat, but her words were desperate, the threats empty. I faced them both, my heart heavy but my conscience clear. This was never about winning or losing. It's about justice. For me, for anyone you might have tried to hurt after me. You won't get away with it. As I left, their stunned silence was a cold comfort. The night air felt sharper, somehow, as I stepped outside, but I walked away with my head held high. I had confronted the darkest part of my life head-on, not with violence or anger, but with the truth. The courtroom was charged with tension, every eye fixed on the drama unfolding. It was the day of reckoning for David and his mistress, the day their fates would be sealed by the weight of their own deceit. Despite their defiant denials, the evidence spoke louder than their lies. As the prosecutor laid out the evidence, it was like reliving the nightmare all over again. First came the restaurant's security footage, a silent witness to David slipping something into my glass, a betrayal captured in grainy clarity. Then, the city's cameras painted a damning trail, showing David abandoning me in a place no one should ever be alone at night. The final nail in the coffin was the medical reports, undeniable proof of the toxins coursing through my veins, a sinister attempt on my life. David and his mistress sat side by side, a united front in their guilt. Their attempts to brush off the evidence were pathetic, their lies crumbling under the weight of truth. "It's all a misunderstanding," David tried to argue, his voice lacking any conviction. The mistress chimed in, her arrogance undimmed. "That evidence could have been doctored. You have no proof it was us," she sneered, trying to sound confident. But the evidence was irrefutable. The videos, the tests, the detective's thorough investigation, it all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. They were guilty, and justice was about to be served. The judge's gavel was a sound of finality. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds the defendants guilty as charged, the judge declared, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. And then, the financial compensation, it wasn't about the money, not really. It was about accountability, about making them pay in some small way for the havoc they wreaked on my life and my daughter's. Life now is a stark contrast to those shadowed days. My daughter and I have found peace, a new beginning forged from the ashes of our past. Our home is filled with laughter and love, a safe haven that once seemed impossible to reclaim. "We did it, Mommy." My daughter's words are a balm to my soul, her smile the brightest light in my life. "Yes, we did, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine," I assure her, and in my heart, I know it's true. The journey was long and fraught with pain, but standing here now, with my daughter by my side, I'm reminded of the strength and resilience that lies within us. We've weathered the storm and emerged stronger, ready to face the future with hope and courage. David's parents, once figures I respected and admired, showed their true colors in the aftermath. They were devastated by their son's actions, heartbroken by the betrayal and harm he caused. The day they decided to cut ties with him and rewrite their will, leaving everything to Lily, my daughter, was a day I'll never forget. I remember sitting down with them, the air thick with a mix of sorrow and determination. "We can't undo what David did, but we want to make sure Lily is taken care of," they said, their voices steady but filled with an underlying pain. I was taken aback, not just by their generosity, but by their resolve. I don't know what to say. "Lily, she'll have a future now, thanks to you," I managed, my voice choked with emotion. "It's what's right. She's our granddaughter, and we love her. We want to make sure she knows she's not defined by her father's mistakes," they replied, a firmness in their tone that left no room for argument. Life since then has been a series of adjustments, of finding our footing in this new reality. I went back to work full-time, diving into my role with a renewed sense of purpose. Balancing work and being a single mom to Lily hasn't been easy, but it's been our life, and it's been good. My mother-in-law, bless her soul, has been a godsend. She stepped up in ways I couldn't have imagined, becoming not just a caregiver for Lily but a pillar of strength for me. Our bond, forged in the fires of family drama, has become unbreakable. Lily's lucky to have you, you know. We both are, I told her one evening as we shared a quiet cup of tea after putting Lily to bed. She waved me off, her usual modest self. Nonsense. I'm just doing what any grandmother would. Besides, seeing you two happy is all the thanks I need. Our conversations, once filled with the pain and confusion of David's betrayal, now revolve around plans for the future, Lily's latest achievements, and the simple joys of our day-to-day lives. We laugh more, worry less, and cherish the peace that has settled over our home. Lily, growing more each day into a bright and curious young girl, is the light of our lives. She knows she is loved, cherished, and supported, not just by me, but by the extended family that rallied around her. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you," Lily said to me one night, her words filling my heart with warmth. "You already are, my love. You're the strongest person I know," I replied, tucking her in, a sense of contentment settling over me. It was a typical Thursday evening at our place, nestled on the outskirts of a sprawling city. Tom and I had settled into our usual routine, him with a beer in hand, lounging on the couch after a long day at his auto repair shop, and me, Nora, eyes glued to my laptop, tracking the latest stock and cryptocurrency trends. Our home, a cozy two-story we picked out for its promise of family and future, now felt more like a battleground for our increasingly divergent lives. "So, how was the market today?" Tom asked, his tone casual, but I sensed the underlying tension. It had become our norm. "Same as always, ups and downs." "Crypto's looking good, though," I replied, trying to keep the peace. Tom scoffed, setting his beer down with a little too much force. "Crypto, again? You know, not everything that glitters is gold, Nora." I sighed, closing my laptop, bracing for the conversation we'd had countless times. "And not every car that comes into your shop is worth fixing, but you do it anyway, because you see the value in it." "Why can't you see the value in what I'm doing?" "Because cars are real, Nora. You can touch them, fix them, sell them. What you're doing, throwing our money at the wind, hoping it'll fly back with more, it's just reckless." I felt the anger bubble up, the same old argument wearing thin. "Reckless? It's not reckless, Tom. It's calculated. There's a difference between gambling and investing. I wish you'd try to understand that." Tom stood up, pacing now. "Calculated? You call putting our hard-earned money into something as volatile as cryptocurrency calculated?" "Yes, I do, because I don't go in blind. I research, I study trends, I make informed decisions. It's no different from what you do with your shop." "My shop is a sure thing, Nora. People always need car repairs. But this is just a phase. What happens when it crashes, huh? What then? We could lose money in any investment, Tom. The shop could falter. Nothing's guaranteed. But we've seen good returns on my investments. Isn't that worth something?" Tom stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It's not just about the money, Nora. It's about security, about not risking everything on a damn coin flip. Why can't we invest more in the shop, expand it? That's a real, tangible way to grow our money. And put all our eggs in one basket? What if something happens to the shop, Tom? Diversification is key. That's investing 101. He shook his head, the gap between our perspectives as vast as ever. "Diversification, sure. But into something stable, not this digital fairy dust." I stood up now, feeling the need to defend my choices, my independence. "You know, for someone who runs his own business, you're surprisingly close-minded. And you're surprisingly stubborn," he shot back. "All I'm saying is, we could be using that money to build something lasting, something we can see and touch, not just numbers on a screen." The conversation was going nowhere, as usual. "Let's just agree to disagree, okay? I won't criticize how you run your shop, and you don't criticize my investments." Tom sighed, the fight draining from him. Fine. But just remember, Nora, when all this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. The tension between Tom and me wasn't the only strain in our lives. His family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Living close to his parents and sister meant frequent interactions, each one a reminder of our differing views on family and responsibility. It was a Sunday afternoon when Tom suggested we visit his parents. The idea alone made my stomach knot. It wasn't the parents I minded, it was Sarah, Tom's sister. Her lifestyle and choices were a constant source of bewilderment to me. Come on, Nora, it's been ages since we've seen them. And Mum's been asking about you. And more. You know Dad is fighting cancer. Tom pressed, noticing my hesitation. Yeah, I bet Sarah's missed me too. I muttered, my sarcasm not lost on Tom. Look, I know you two don't see eye to eye, but can't you just... I don't know, try? For me? Sighing, I agreed. Fine, but I'm not staying if she starts on one of her shopping spree stories. We arrived to find Sarah already there, flaunting her latest designer bag. The air of superiority she carried like a perfume instantly grated on me. Look at this, just got it yesterday. Isn't it just fabulous? She gushed, barely acknowledging our presence. It's something, I managed to say, biting my tongue. Tom's mother, oblivious to the tension, ushered us in. Nora, dear, so glad you could make it. You two should visit more often. The afternoon dragged on, with Sarah dominating the conversation, recounting her latest vacation and shopping exploits. I tried to keep a neutral face, engaging in minimal conversation, but my patience was wearing thin. So, Nora, still playing with your stocks and bits? Sarah sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. It's called investing, Sarah. You should try it sometime instead of blowing through money on things you don't need. I shot back, my annoyance breaking through. Tom shot me a warning look, but it was too late. Sarah scoffed. Investing? Please, like gambling on the internet is anything to brag about. At least when I spend my money, I have something to show for it. Something to show until it goes out of fashion next season, I retorted, unable to help myself. That's enough, both of you. Tom's father interjected, his tone stern. We're here to enjoy each other's company, not to argue about whatever this is. The rest of the visit passed in an uncomfortable silence. As we left, Tom couldn't hold back his frustration. Nora, why do you have to provoke her? Can't you just let it go for one afternoon? Me? Provoke her? She's the one who started it with her snide remarks. I'm just not going to sit there and take it, Tom. It's just, sometimes I wish you'd try a little harder, for the sake of peace. Try harder? Tom, I'm not the one splurging on luxuries and then flaunting them in everyone's face. Why doesn't anyone tell her to stop acting like a spoiled brat? Because she's family, Nora. We look out for each other, even if we don't always agree with what they're doing. That's just it, Tom. Looking out for each other is one thing, but enabling bad behavior is another. There's a difference, and it's about time someone pointed it out to her. Tom sighed, the weariness evident in his voice. I know. But what can we do? She's set in her ways, and Mom and Dad aren't going to change how they treat her. It's not just about Sarah, Tom. It's about us, too. How are we supposed to plan for our future when there's always going to be this financial black hole in your family? We'll figure it out, Nora. We always do. The news hit us hard and fast. Tom's dad, Mr. Harrison, had lost his battle with cancer. It felt like one moment we were discussing treatment options, and the next, we were plunged into mourning. Amidst the shock and grief, Sarah, Tom's sister, took charge of the funeral arrangements. It wasn't long before she dropped a bombshell on us about the cost. Sitting in our living room, looking like a storm cloud had settled over his head, Tom relayed what Sarah had told him. Nora, Sarah says the funeral's gonna cost $60,000. She's expecting us to chip in half. I nearly choked on my tea. $60,000? Tom, that's insane. Are we funding a funeral or a royal wedding here? Tom's face darkened, his eyes narrowing. Now's not the time, Nora. This isn't about the money. It's about giving my dad the send-off he deserves. But $60,000? There has to be a mistake. It's too much. Too much? Tom's voice rose, and I could see the vein in his forehead starting to pulse. My dad has just died, Nora. And here you are, haggling over pennies. What's wrong with you? I flinched at his harshness. I'm not haggling, Tom. I'm just shocked. We never even spent that kind of money on our own house. Tom stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I don't need this. I don't need you telling me what's too much for my own father's funeral. If you can't see past your damn spreadsheets for once, maybe you should just stay out of it. The hurt from his words cut deep, but I swallowed my retort. This was grief talking, not my Tom. I'm sorry, Tom. I'll transfer the $30,000 to Sarah. It's just, this is a lot to process. Tom paced the room, hands buried in his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize over the years. Yeah, well, it's not just about the money, Nora. It's about doing right by him. And if that means paying whatever it costs, then so be it. When I confirmed the transfer to Sarah, Tom barely acknowledged it, lost in his own world of grief and anger. The distance between us felt like miles, not the few feet of our living room. Walking into the funeral agency, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The last few days had been a blur of grief and confusion, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to learn. I'm here for Mr. Harrison's funeral, I announced to the woman behind the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up from her computer, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're a day late. Mr. Harrison was cremated yesterday. My heart stopped. What? But, how? I was told the funeral was today. She shook her head gently, her eyes full of sympathy. The family requested to move the date forward. I'm very sorry for your loss and the confusion. I stood there, dumbfounded, my mind racing. How could Tom not tell me? Why was I left in the dark about such a significant change? Fuming, I dialed Tom's number, my fingers shaking with anger and disbelief. Tom, why the hell didn't you tell me the funeral was moved? I just showed up like an idiot, only to find out I missed everything. Tom's voice was cold, detached. Because I didn't think you cared, Nora. All you've done is complain about the costs and question every decision. Why would I think you'd want to be there? Because he was my father-in-law. Because I'm your wife. How could you just exclude me like that? My voice cracked, a mixture of hurt and fury. Well, maybe not for long. He shot back, and I could almost hear the bitterness seeping through the phone. What's that supposed to mean? I demanded, my heart sinking. I'm done, Nora. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's so indifferent. You're more concerned with your bitcoins and shares than with this family. I've got the divorce papers ready. His words were like a slap in the face. Divorce? Was he serious? You're kidding, right? Over this? Tom, we can talk about it, we can work things out. No, Nora. It's too late. The house is going up for sale. We'll split everything and go our separate ways. That's it. I was speechless, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Stunned, I wandered back to the parking lot, where I saw Sarah pulling in, driving a brand new luxury car. The sight of it made my blood boil. Nice car, Sarah. Where'd you get the money for this? Inheritance? Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she tossed her hair back. Yeah, something like that. Dad left me a little something. The casual way she mentioned her father, with shopping bags in her hands and not a trace of sadness on her face, was infuriating. A little something, huh? Looks like morning is treating you pretty well. Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a smirk. Well, we all grieve in our own ways, don't we? Some of us invest in stocks, and some of us in cars. I clenched my fists, the injustice of it all burning inside me. This was all wrong. Tom and I were falling apart, and here was Sarah, benefiting from the chaos. Enjoy the car, Sarah. Looks like it cost a pretty penny. Or should I say, a pretty dollar? She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty parking lot. Oh, Nora, always so concerned about the money. Don't worry, it's all been taken care of. I watched her walk away, her laughter lingering in the air. The man I loved wanted nothing to do with me, and the family I had tried to be a part of was showing their true colors. The days following the funeral felt like navigating through a thick fog of disbelief and betrayal. The weight of the divorce papers in my bag felt like carrying a boulder, a constant reminder of my crumbling marriage. But the sight of Sarah's new luxury car planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't shake off. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to pay a visit to the funeral home, hoping to uncover some answers. Walking into the funeral home, a mix of suspicion and determination fueled my steps. It felt surreal, being here under these circumstances, but I needed answers. The place was quiet, the air filled with a solemnity fitting its purpose. At the reception, I recognized a face from the past, Jackie, a classmate from high school who'd ended up in the most unexpected of places. Jackie! I exclaimed, a bit too loudly for the setting. I didn't know you worked here. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face, before recognition set in. Nora? Wow, it's been ages. What brings you here? Something I can help with? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Yeah, actually. It's about my father-in-law's funeral. I heard it was arranged here. Jackie's expression turned professional, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Sure, let me pull up the details. Give me a sec. As she typed away, I fidgeted, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The moment she found the record, her brows furrowed. Okay, here it is. The service was pretty standard. Cremation was requested, keeping things on the simpler side. The total came to $5,000. My heart sank. $5,000? But that's not what we were told. We paid $60,000, or at least, we were led to believe that's what it cost. Jackie paused, her face a mask of concern. That's a huge difference. It was Sarah who handled the arrangements, right? Everything here was billed at $5,000, no more. The pieces were starting to fit together, a picture I didn't want to see. Can you print me a copy of that bill? I need proof. Sure thing, Jackie said, her tone sympathetic. She quickly printed out a duplicate of the check and handed it to me. Holding the paper, it felt like a piece of a puzzle that would unravel a bigger deception. Thanks, Jackie. I've got to sort this out. Armed with the printout from the funeral home, my next stop was confronting the family, particularly Sarah. The air felt heavy as I drove to my mother-in-law's house, where I knew they'd all be gathered, probably discussing the estate and the aftermath of the funeral. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and determination. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. I hesitated at the door, gathering my courage before stepping inside. The sound of my footsteps seemed to echo through the hallway, announcing my arrival. In the living room, Tom, Sarah, and my mother-in-law were seated, looking like a picture of mourning that was about to be shattered. My mother-in-law, her eyes shadowed with grief, broke the silence first. Dear, we missed you yesterday at the funeral. We thought you'd be there. Taking a deep breath, I replied, I was told it was today. I'm so sorry for your loss, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions inside me. I then turned to Tom. Can we talk? In private? I hoped to spare his mother any more distress. Tom's response cut through the room. No secrets here. You're not part of this family anymore, remember? His words stung, but I pushed on, pulling out the check from the funeral home. Then explain this to me. The funeral cost $5,000, not the $60,000, Sarah claimed. Where did the rest go? Tom looked genuinely shocked, turning to Sarah with a bewildered, "What's this about?" Sarah squirmed under our gazes. I needed the money," she finally admitted, her voice small. The revelation seemed to hang in the air until Tom's mom, overhearing, added, "Your father saved for his own farewell. I even gave Sarah $10,000 more to cover everything." I did the math out loud, tension rising. $70,000 in total, and only $5,000 spent. "Sarah, where's the rest?" Flustered, Sarah confessed to splurging the money on a new car for herself, her gaze darting away, unable to meet mine. I expected Tom to explode, but instead, he almost tenderly told Sarah, "You shouldn't have done that. Be more careful next time." His response floored me. "Careful? She committed fraud, Tom. And you're okay with that?" Tom's justification left me reeling. "You wouldn't understand. You've got no family, you don't get what it means to stick together." That was the last straw. In front of them all, I signed the divorce papers with a flourish. "Sarah, you owe me $30,000. Pay up, or I'm going to the police." Tom's protests followed me out the door, but I didn't look back. I'd seen enough, heard enough. The betrayal was complete, and so was my resolve. As I walked away, the finality of my actions settled in. There was no going back, only forward from here, away from the lies and the deceit that had marred what I once thought of as family. Packing up my life into boxes felt surreal, like I was an observer in my own story. The "for sale" sign outside the house was a stark reminder of the finality of it all. By afternoon, I was settling into a small apartment that felt more like a fresh start than a downgrade. That evening, as I was sorting through the remnants of my past life, my phone rang. Tom's name flashed on the screen, a name I no longer felt attached to. I answered, curiosity edging out resentment. "Nora, you need to back off Sarah." Tom's voice came through, tinged with an uncharacteristic harshness. "Back off?" I laughed, cold and sharp. "Not a chance, Tom. She took from me, and I want it back. Your sister's a thief." Tom was silent for a moment. "She's family. You wouldn't understand." "Family?" I scoffed. "That ship has sailed, Tom. As far as I'm concerned, you and your sister are just people I used to know." He tried to argue, but I cut him off. "Save it. Sarah has 2 weeks to return my money, or I'm pressing charges. And you? Stay out of it. You're nothing to me now." Hanging up, I felt a mix of sadness and liberation. The man I once loved was now just another obstacle in my path to reclaiming my life. 2 weeks later, a knock at my door heralded the return of my $30,000. Sarah stood there, her posture defiant, a sneer playing on her lips. "Here's your money," she spat, thrusting an envelope into my hands. "Happy now, you money-grubbing witch?" I took the envelope, my gaze steady. "It's not about the money, Sarah. It's about principle. About not letting you walk all over people." She laughed, hollow and bitter. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." As she turned to leave, I called out, "Just remember, Sarah. Karma's a real pain. What goes around, comes around." Closing the door, I leaned against it, the envelope heavy in my hand. The money was a small victory, but the real win was standing up for myself, refusing to be a victim of their greed and lies. Life had found a new rhythm, calmer and more predictable, when out of the blue, my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Tom, a voice from a past I had neatly folded away. "Hey, I need a favor. A big one." Tom's voice sounded more worn than I remembered. I paused, the suddenness of the call throwing me. "A favor? Tom, we're past favors, don't you think?" "It's Sarah. She's in deep this time. Debt's up to her eyeballs, and the wolves are at the door. We've sold everything, the house, the shop, it's still not enough. His words took a moment to sink in. And you're calling me why? I'm not part of this circus anymore, Tom. He sighed, a sound of desperation. Come on, don't be like that. You got out, made it big with your trading. Can't you spare something, for old time's sake? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he still saw me as a lifeline for their mess. Spare something? For her? After she nearly ruined us with her lies? You've got some nerve, Tom. It's not just for her. It's for all of us. You wouldn't be where you are without me. Don't forget that, he countered, his voice edged with bitterness. A laugh, sharp and short, escaped me. Where I am is despite you, not because of you. You think I owe you? That's rich. There was silence on the line, heavy and uncomfortable. So, that's it then? You're going to turn your back on us? Us? There is no us, Tom. There hasn't been for a long time. And as for turning my back, I think you've got me confused with someone who still cares. Hanging up, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also relief. That chapter of my life was truly closed now. Sitting in the living room of my new house, a place I had earned with my sweat and smarts, I realized how far I had come. This was my sanctuary, built not on the shaky grounds of deceit and manipulation, but on my resilience and hard work. Hey, everybody. Name's Emma, and if you've got a minute, I've got a tale that's a bit of a roller coaster, one that dives into love, betrayal, and a fight for dignity. Before we dive into the deep end, let me set the stage and introduce you to the cast of this little drama of mine. It starts with me, Emma. Born into what many would call privilege, with a silver spoon and all that jazz. But despite the cushy start, I was raised to value hard work over handouts. My dad's the king of the engine additive world, a self-made man who turned a niche into an empire. Mom's no slouch either, she built a beauty salon empire from the ground up, making her name synonymous with style. Their divorce when I was 19 could have been messy, but they kept it classy, splitting everything down the middle while somehow maintaining a friendship. Dad stayed single, content with his business and bachelorhood, while Mom remarried but didn't expand the family beyond me. Enter Jake, stage right. My husband, or as I've come to think of him, the catalyst of my personal upheaval. We got hitched when I was fresh out of college, after I landed a job teaching music to kids with more energy than sense. Life seemed pretty sweet until we hit a bump, I got pregnant, and suddenly, Jake's true colors started to bleed through. One lazy Sunday, sprawled on the couch with his feet up, Jake casually lobbed the grenade into our life. Emma, babe, why don't you just quit your job? Stay at home with the baby. We'll manage. I nearly choked on my tea. Quit my job? Jake, you know we can't afford that on your salary alone. Plus, I love my work. He waved a hand dismissively, a smirk playing on his lips. Come on, Em. It's not like we're ordinary folks. Your dad's loaded. A little help from him, and we're golden. I felt my blood boil. That's not the point, Jake. I'm not tapping into my parents' wealth for our day-to-day. We agreed to live within our means. But Jake wouldn't let it go. Over dinner, in front of his parents no less, he brought it up again. Emma's considering taking some time off work, you know, with the baby coming and all. His mom, Carol, a woman with a sharp tongue and an eye for advantage, jumped in. Oh, that's wonderful. With Emma's family, you two don't have to worry about a thing. I clenched my fork a little tighter, trying to keep my cool. Actually, we haven't decided anything. And we intend to manage on our own, thank you. Jake's dad, Frank, never one to miss a beat, chimed in with a chuckle. Why play the hard way, Emma? A little help from your folks, and you could be living easy. Why waste that opportunity? The conversation spiraled from there, with Jake and his parents painting grand pictures of a life lived on my parents' dime. Every word felt like a betrayal, twisting the knife a bit deeper. They didn't see me, they saw a ticket to an easy life. That night, lying in bed next to Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. "Jake, do you really think we should be relying on my parents like that?" I whispered, hoping for some sign I'd misread the situation. He rolled over, facing me with those eyes that once melted my heart. "Emma, it's not about need. It's about what's smart. Your parents can afford it, and we deserve a break. Why not take it?" Deserve. That word echoed in my head long after Jake had drifted off to sleep. It was clear we were on different paths, with different values. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the signs, and where we went from here. After that first clash with Jake about money and pride, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to the same page. But, oh, was I wrong? Enter the in-laws, stage left, with their own special brand of chaos. Jake's folks weren't exactly the poster children for self-reliance. They had this way of sniffing out a free meal from miles away, and my family's wealth was like a beacon to them. One evening, we're all sitting around our cramped living room, and Frank's going on about this new business opportunity that just needed a small investment to get off the ground. "So, Emma, darling," Carol starts, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that could give you cavities. "With your family's resources, I bet you could easily help us out. It's such a sure thing." I tried to keep my cool, really I did. "Carol, Frank, I've told you before, we're managing our finances independently. My parents' money isn't part of this equation." But Frank, oh, he's got the persistence of a door-to-door salesman. "Come on, Emma. It's not like you'd feel it. What's a few thousand to your dad? He probably spends that on golf in a weekend." The audacity floored me. Here they were, sitting in our home, eating our food, and they had the guts to treat my family's hard-earned money like it was theirs for the taking. Jake tries to play mediator. Maybe they have a point. It's just a loan, right? We could help out family. Family? I nearly choked on the word. "Jake, when did we decide it's our job to bankroll your parents' dreams?" The room went ice cold. Carol, not one to let a moment of drama go by unexploited, piped up. "Well, I never. Here we thought family helped each other out. But if you're going to be stingy." Stingy? Now, I was seeing red. "Working for what you have isn't being stingy, Carol. It's called being responsible. Maybe you should try it sometime." Frank tried to smooth things over, but the damage was done. "Look, Emma, no need to get upset. We're just talking here." Talking, right. I couldn't hide my sarcasm. Seems like all we ever do is talk about how my family can solve your problems. That night, after they finally left, with Jake apologizing for his parents' misunderstanding, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a full-on invasion of our lives by two people who saw me not as a daughter-in-law, but as a walking, talking ATM. After our little Lily came into this world, life took a turn I didn't quite expect. You'd think the arrival of a grandchild would bring out the best in people, right? Well, not so much with Jake's folks. They showed up at the hospital with what had to be the cheapest onesie from the discount bin. It still had the clearance sticker on it. But when my folks came through with a beautiful hand-knit blanket and some top-notch baby gear, you'd have thought World War III was about to break out in that hospital room. "Wow, really laying it on thick, aren't they?" Carol quipped, eyeing the gifts with a mix of disdain and envy. "Must be nice to just throw money around. Bet they could have just gotten you a house instead of all this fluff." Jake chimed in with a chuckle. "Yeah, Mom's got a point, Em. Your folks sure don't hold back. A house might have been more practical, huh?" My heart sank. Here I was, holding our newborn, and all they could talk about was how my parents should have spent their money. It stung, hearing Jake echo his mom's words. Was our daughter just a dollar sign to them? I tried to keep the peace, biting back my growing anger. Well, it's not about the price tag, right? It's the thought that counts. But Frank wasn't about to let it go. Oh, sure, sure. But when you think about it, a nice little investment in property, now, that's a gift that keeps on giving. The ride home from the hospital was tense. Jake tried to smooth things over, saying his parents were just old-fashioned and didn't mean anything by it. But the seed was planted. Doubts started creeping in about why Jake really married me. Was it love, or was my family's bank account the main attraction? A few weeks later, during one of their unsolicited visits, Carol brought it up again. We were all crammed in our living room, Lily fussing in my arms, and Carol couldn't resist a jab at the new stroller my mom had bought us. Must be nice, having your folks shower Lily with all these expensive toys and gadgets. Though, a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful, don't you think, she said, her voice dripping with that passive-aggressive tone I'd come to dread. Jake, sitting beside his mom, nodded. Actually, babe, we've been talking. Maybe your parents could help us out with a down payment instead of more baby stuff. Makes sense, right? I was floored. Not only were Jake's parents relentless, but now Jake was on board with turning our daughter's birth into a bargaining chip for financial gain. It felt like I was living in some twisted reality where love and family meant less than material wealth. Is that what this is about for you, Jake? Using my parents for money? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. I thought we were in this together, for better or worse, not for richer or poorer. Jake looked taken aback, but Carol just sniffed. Well, when your wife's parents are rich, it's only practical to think about these things. After they finally left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Lily asleep beside me. The realization hit me hard. My marriage, my family, it all felt like a transaction to them. And I was the currency. The last few years have been a roller coaster, to say the least. Lily's grown into a fiery little 3-year-old, full of life and laughter. But life threw us some curveballs that I never saw coming. First, it was Mom. The accident was sudden, a shock to all of us. I was drowning in grief, barely keeping it together, for Lily. But Jake? His first question wasn't about how I was holding up. No, it was, so, how much are you getting from your mom's will? It felt like a slap in the face. My mom wasn't even cold, and here he was, eyeing her legacy like a vulture. According to Mom's will, I inherited the barbershop chain. I knew nothing about running a business, but Jake was quick to offer his expertise. Babe, let me handle this. You know I've got a knack for business, he said, all confidence and smiles. I was too lost in my grief to argue. So, I let him take the reins, though I made sure the ownership papers stayed in my name. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he could turn things around for us. Then, barely a year later, Dad passed away from a heart attack. Losing both my parents in such a short time broke something in me. I needed Jake more than ever, but all he could talk about was what we'd inherit from Dad. The day after Dad's death, Jake's parents came over. I expected maybe a shred of decency, a moment of respect for my loss. But no, they dove straight into speculations about Dad's wealth. So, Emma, must be a hefty sum coming your way, huh? Frank said, barely able to contain his glee. I saw red. Can you not? For once, just stop talking about money. I shouted, the words exploding out of me like shrapnel. Carol put on her best offended face. Well, I never. We're just concerned about the family's future. No need to be rude. Jake tried to play peacemaker, as always. They're just curious. It's a big deal, you know? A big deal? I echoed, my voice rising. My parents are gone, Jake. And all you and your parents can think about is cashing in? Is that all I am to you? A bank? The room fell silent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked at me, then at his parents, and mumbled some half-hearted apology. But the damage was done. I couldn't stand the sight of them, their greed, their complete lack of empathy. Get out, I said, my voice steady, but cold. They left, Carol muttering under her breath, Frank with a scowl. Jake lingered, trying to justify his parents' behavior. But I was done listening. 2 days after my dad died, Jake comes bouncing through the doorway earlier than usual. "Babe, I've got awesome news." He beams at me, barely containing his excitement. "I've struck a deal to sell the hairdresser chain. Can you believe it?" My jaw nearly hit the floor. "What? You did what without even asking me?" I was fuming, feeling a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Before we could really dive into it, his folks showed up, ready to party like we'd hit the jackpot. They brought in this feast from some fancy restaurant and a bunch of brochures that screamed high roller. Carol was all smiles, waving those brochures in my face. "Guess what, honey? We've sold the old condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast." I stared at her, feeling like I was trapped in some bad dream. "Hold on. You what?" "Nobody asked me about moving. I don't want to live by the beach, with all that humidity and the winds, with a kid. Are you out of your mind?" Carol just waved off my concerns like I was talking about the weather. "Oh, don't you worry about that. We've also booked a cruise. You should come with us. It'll be fabulous." "Where's this money coming from?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "Well, darling, with your father's passing and the sale of the salons, money's no object now. We're set for life. Think about it, yachts, private jets. We're living the dream." Carol's eyes were practically sparkling with dollar signs. I turned to Jake, utterly dumbfounded. Why are we even talking about selling my mom's business again? And what's this nonsense about being set for life? "Babe, it makes sense. Managing both businesses will be too much. We gotta focus on what's more profitable. It's for our future, for our daughter's future." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The greed, the audacity, it was all too much. "Show me the financials for the salon," I demanded. "I want to see everything before we make any rash decisions." Jake squirmed, avoiding eye contact. "Look, it's all about our future, about making sure we're comfortable." His parents joined the chorus, pressing me to just let go and enjoy the windfall. But looking at them, all I could see were vultures circling. "Why the rush to sell the hairdresser shops again?" I pressed, needing answers from Tom. Jake shrugged, the picture of faux reason. "Look, babe, after your dad's gone, juggling both businesses just doesn't make sense. We gotta focus on what brings in more dough. The car oil thing is a gold mine compared to the salons." His folks perked up at this, chiming in with their 2 cents. "Darling, think about it. Selling those little shops could give you a life of luxury. Why waste your time on them?" His mom cooed, her voice dripping with greed. The sight of them, practically salivating over my inheritance, made my skin crawl. "I want you to leave. Now," I said, my voice firm, my resolve stronger. "This is a time to mourn my father, not feast on what he left behind." Jake tried to interrupt, but I cut him off. "And another thing, this is my inheritance we're talking about. Mine. You and your parents have no say in this." The air turned icy as they realized I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. With heavy steps and heavier scowls, they left, leaving me to ponder the lonely battle ahead. The dawn after my father's funeral found me in a fog of grief, the world around me dulled to a monotonous gray. That's when Jake decided to inject his version of color back into our lives. Over a breakfast that tasted like cardboard, he launched into his agenda. "We need to call a meeting with the founders of your father's company, pronto," Jake stated, his voice slicing through the quiet like a knife. I paused, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth, and stared at him. "Jake, my father has just been buried. Can't this wait? I need some time to process everything." He waved off my concerns with a flick of his hand. "Time is money, babe. We need to act fast." Frustrated and seeking clarity, I reached out to our family lawyer, asking for a breakdown of the barbershop chain's status and a primer on my father's business dealings. Information, I hoped, would give me some ground to stand on. A month whirled by in a blur of legal jargon and financial statements until Jake, accompanied by his parents, descended upon our house once more, each of them bursting with unsolicited advice and greed-laden suggestions. Without so much as a hello, Jake dove right in. "You know, I've been thinking, I'm the right man to lead your dad's company." The audacity of his claim left me speechless, but he wasn't done. "And, I'll need a new car. Something that screams business mogul. The latest BMW should do the trick." Before I could even muster a response, Carol chimed in with her own outrageous demands. "The coastal house is nearly ready. We just need to throw in another $300,000, plus some for furniture. And, dear, I expect you to set up an account for me. I need to maintain my lifestyle, after all." After listening to their endless demands, I knew what I had to do. It was like a switch flipped inside me. No more Mrs. Nice Gal. Clutching the divorce papers like a shield, I stepped forward, interrupting their chatter. "Jake, we need to talk," I announced, placing the papers before him on the coffee table. He picked them up, a frown creasing his forehead. "What's this, then?" His attempt at nonchalance couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Divorce papers," I stated, every word deliberate, icy. "I've had the business audited. Jake, you've run it into the ground. It's teetering on the edge of ruin because of your management." His face drained of color, a guilty child caught in a lie. I was trying to make it better," he stammered, his excuses as flimsy as his confidence. "Make it better? By firing our most talented staff and neglecting the core of what made the business succeed?" My voice rose, fueled by a cocktail of anger and betrayal. Carol, ever the meddler, couldn't resist intervening. "Now, dear, let's remember he's entitled to half of everything. Marriage binds assets, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, but there was no joy in it. "Nice try. But everything's been in my name since before I made the colossal mistake of marrying your son. He gets nothing from me." The room went silent. They were stunned, their grand schemes shattering around them. "And another thing," I added, staring Jake down. "You're going to pay back every penny you've cost the business. Every single penny." When the reality of the divorce finally hit Jake, his reaction was to desperately grovel, pleading with me to reconsider. "Please, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. His parents, not to be outdone in the drama department, launched into their own tearful performance. They lamented about sinking all their funds into the coastal house, a property now hanging by a thread without the next installment. "We're going to lose everything," his mother sobbed, her tears flowing freely. "Please, think of what this means for us." I listened, my heart hardened by their previous actions, feeling nothing but a detached coldness towards their plight. "Sorry, but that's your mess," I stated, my tone unwavering. With a newfound resolve, I guided them to the door, closing it, and this chapter of my life, behind them. In the days that followed, I didn't allow myself to dwell on the past. Instead, I focused on the future, selling the apartment that Jake and I once shared. The sale provided just enough for a quaint, welcoming house that promised a new beginning for my daughter and me. Stepping into our new home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of peace enveloping us in a way that had been missing for too long. The wheels of justice turned slowly but surely, and when they finally caught up with Jake, he was ordered to compensate for the turmoil he'd inflicted on the hairdresser chain. The courts determined that his recklessness had a price, and he was forced to liquidate his share of our old apartment to meet his financial obligations. Watching him being held accountable for once felt like a bittersweet vindication for the hardship he'd put us through. Out of nowhere, my phone rang one day, and on the other end was my former mother-in-law, her voice laced with desperation. "We're in a bind. We need help to buy a place, any amount would help," she pleaded, her audacity leaving me incredulous. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts, before responding. "You made your bed," I replied, my tone steady and resolute. It's time you lie in it. Ending the call, a mix of emotions washed over me, anger at their continued sense of entitlement, but also a profound sense of freedom from their clutches. After everything that went down with the divorce and wrestling back control over my mom's hairdresser chain, life finally started to brighten up again. It was a tough climb, but gradually, the salons began to find their old spark. Bringing back those top stylists we'd lost felt like a victory parade. Watching them walk back through those doors, ready to bring their magic back to our chairs, it was like watching the place come alive again. Turns out, I was more cut out for the business world than I'd ever imagined. Each day was a new lesson, a new surprise about what I could achieve. If it hadn't been for being cornered by life's cruel twists, I might never have uncovered this side of me. Handling my dad's car oil business was another mountain to climb. For now, I decided to bring in a manager to steer the ship while I got my bearings. "It's all yours for now, but keep me in the loop," I told him, making it clear I was still in charge. "Once Lily's old enough, maybe around 20, I'm thinking of passing it to her if she's interested. I want her to have options, to choose her path. Meanwhile, I'm dipping my toes into it, learning the ropes." Our new home, just me and Lily, was a haven of peace, a world away from the turmoil we'd left behind. It was small, sure, but it was ours, a place where we could grow, heal, and build something new. Every corner filled with laughter, every nook cradling a memory we were making together. Out in the garden, Lily's laughter was a balm to my soul. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she'd say, her eyes alight with wonder and admiration. "You're going to be even more amazing," I'd respond, pulling her into a hug. I knew, deep down, that we were on the brink of something wonderful. Together, we were unstoppable, ready to meet whatever the future held with open arms and hopeful hearts.